Holy crap.
People persist in doubting the evidence.
Don't run and hide. Don't be afraid. Don't turn away any longer. The truth will set you free.
You're listening to Jimmy Church Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
We're turning all of our antennas towards Jimmy Church on Dark Matter Radio.
And now, your host, the captain of conspiracy, the prince of paranormal. This ain't your daddy's radio network show. This is Jimmy Church, Fade to Black.
Yeah. How you doing? We made it to Friday. What's funny, this is like Friday's my Wednesday. And starting next week, kicks off on Monday. Lordy. This is Fade to Black. Bespoke radio for the masses. Only on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Today is Friday, July 25th. 192 days into the new year. Welcome everybody listening around the world. All across this great country of ours. Going to be talking about that in just a little bit. We are live from the JP Motorsports Studios right here in sunny, burning hot, roasting Burbank, California. I don't know what we hit today, but it was hot. It was hot. For KJCR and the Dark Matter Radio Network, I am your host, Jimmy Church. How you doing? Let's get this one cracking. Big salute to the proud men and women in uniform all around this great country, all around the world, fighting the good fight for us. Without them, there is no me, there is no you, there is no us, and there is no freedom of speech, and this broadcast would not be happening. And I really need you to think about that. All right, let's go. Brad, I just got your email. You just bummed me the bleep out. Maybe I'll let everybody know in a little bit. Our dead guy birthday today is Walter Payton. Born in 1954, died in 1999 at the age of 45. Broke every record, most rushing yards, carries, touchdowns, known as Sweetness. Probably, could he have been the greatest ever? Certainly seems that way when you go back and look. Little guy, too. 13 years with the Chicago Bears. The Fridge. Jim McMahon. Yeah, that was a good team. Those were fun times. Not too long ago, I had watched the original Super Bowl Shuffle video with the team. Oh, my goodness. Times have changed, haven't they? All right. Follow us on Twitter right now, at JChurchRadio. You know what to do. You're listening to me. Whether you're on TuneIn, Dark Matter, our site, jimmychurchradio.com, wherever you are listening from, right there somewhere is a Twitter link. Go and click on it, at JChurchRadio. That's what you want to do. And then you want to hashtag DMRadioNet and take your chances. Go hang out on TweetDeck with all of us. I'm there. You need to be too. I'm reading it right now. There it is. Sometimes TweetDeck flashes by too fast. It's like a slot machine in Vegas, and I can't keep up with it. But Ken Lipson just said Barry Sanders, Jim Brown, Peyton. Yeah, Barry. Barry. Bad luck, man. Wrong team. But amazing runner. Jim Brown. Yep. You know what was cool, though, was when Walter Payton broke OJ's record. That's all I got to say. All right. Enough of the spots. Facebook is jimmychurchradio.com. Go over there. That's the fan page. YouTube. YouTube is there. Well, for the comment section, it seems like everybody has to comment. But you heard a show. You want to go back, catch the replay. You want to go back and check it out. It's all on YouTube. We lagged a little bit this week, technical issues. It had nothing to do with, us being lazy and messing around and goofing off. It wasn't about that. It was a nightmare, actually, posting videos without audio. Oh, man. That was a lesson to be learned. So, anyway, go now. Follow, like, subscribe. This is Bespoke Radio for the Masses. It is all for you. Adrian Peterson, yeah. Could be. Eugene, could be. I have said many times, probably the most gifted athlete on planet Earth is Adrian Peterson when he hangs onto the ball. And you know what I'm talking about. That's nothing personal. That's his problem, not mine. Later on tonight, I'm going to try to open up the lines. We have so much that we're going to do tonight. At the bottom of the hour, we're going to do Space Boy's debut of his cover of Space Oddity. That'll be at 7:30. And then immediately after that, we'll do the simulcast with Clyde Lewis, Ground Zero, two hosts that just happen to get along. It's going to be really cool. Clyde, I talked about it last night. Clyde had a Bigfoot sighting up in Washington, filming his documentary on Maury Island and that UFO case, and had himself a bona fide Bigfoot sighting. Mini Bigfoot. Mini Bigfoot. Mini, how would you say that? But that's what he did. And so I got to tell you, it's a crazy story. So we're going to do that at 7:35, and then at the top of the hour, Todd Murphy. And one of my favorite subjects, I talk about it all the time, reincarnation. We're going to be doing that, out of body, the brain, God in the brain, the God helmet. It's going to be an excellent show. Really looking forward to Todd coming on. And I talked to Todd all week. Jimmy, we're not going to have enough time. Todd, we're going to have 2.5 hours. Well, then we cut that back with the simulcast. And he's like, we're not going to have enough time. We'll have enough. We have so much to get into tonight with Todd. So it's going to be great. Reincarnation, man. I'm fully cognizant of what that is all about. And, okay, all right. You can email throughout the show, jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. I tweeted right before the broadcast tonight. I didn't get my Lou email before the show, and I'm a little depressed about that. Email, jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. You can do that direct, or go over to the contact page over at jimmychurchradio.com. Scroll down right there. You can email. Everything goes through the producers. But if you want to just, be anonymous, if you're chicken, Colonel Sanders, if you need to do that, go to the contact page where we use non-NSA specially encrypted servers. That's right. Contact in the deserts. All right. Are you ready? Got 3 winners. The last 3. And here they are. Drum roll, please. Look, I said last night with Nick Menza, I'm the whitest drummer ever in the history of whitedom. Here we go. And the winners are, first up, Michael Rad. I believe he's a Fadernaut. Is Michael Rad a fate? Is he tweeting right now? I'm looking over. Michael Rad, you are going to contact in the desert. Yay! Michael Rad. Next up, next winner, drum roll, please. Next up, Jason Lamp. Like that, Lamp. Jason Lamp, you are going to contact in the desert. How cool is that? And last but not least, the winner is Ian Fowles. I believe I'm saying that right. Ian Fowles, Fowles. You are going to Contact in the Desert. Michael Rad, Jason Lamp, Ian Fowles. We will be contacting everyone during and after the show. If you are listening right now, you got about 2 or 3 minutes. Give us a call. Would love to get you on the line. Michael Rad, Jason Lamp, Ian Fowles are the last 3 winners for Contact in the Desert. Congratulations. Really excited about it. And talk to the good folks over there today, getting everything set up, the logistics, and how we've got it all going on. I cannot wait. Now, I will say this. Our executive producer, Rita, said to me last night, I want to have an after party at our hotel. we got a cabin. What? Think about that for a second. Yeah. That's all I'm going to say. And she just tweeted me right now, what are you doing? What are you doing? I can only imagine what she just said. But, yeah, Contact in the Desert. Cannot wait. All right. Yesterday after the show, Rita, I'll take care of this in just a second. And she just said it's the 206th day of the new year. Yeah. Is it really? Am I off? Is Kovar off? I need to blame somebody for this. Somebody preps me for the show. I only know what I know. Got this email last night. Check this out. There's a slight edit in the email. I had to take out the center section of this. But listen to this. Are you guys ready? This is from Danny. This is from Lebanon. Sent to us last night. It says, I never thought I could ever enjoy a radio show other than Dreamland, Coast to Coast, and Dark Matter. I can't imagine how, and I don't know why, your show, Fade to Black, got my attention and my focus since I first heard it on DMRN. And I find it extremely interesting. Keep on the good work. We need you, especially here in the bottomless pit of hell known as the Middle East. Cheers, Danny. And man, did that just make me feel right. And that is exactly why we do this show. And how do I know he listened to this show last night? He dropped Nori in the email. And I'm like, wow. You know, what is going on over there right now, the insanity that is going on. And he's listening to this show and took the time out to send that email. So, Danny, if you're listening right now, I got the email. I got all of it, and you know what you put in the middle. I couldn't read that. That's not right, but that is an email. You can write me right now, Jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. Do so over on the contacts page. And when we come back, I've got a bunch of stuff that I'm going to comment on and go over. I will get to it in just a second. Let's take our first break. Let's get this one out of here. And that's it. This is Fade to Black, the Friday edition. Apparently, 206 days into the new year. I stand corrected. Somebody's going to get their knuckles whacked. This is Fade to Black, only on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Bespoke radio for the masses. This is done for you. Tailor fit, custom made. Follow us on Twitter right now, @JChurchRadio. Bottom of the hour, Space Boy, Space Oddity, and then the Clyde Lewis simulcast. We're going to get to that. And then guest Todd Murphy at the top of the hour. Stay with us, everybody. Be back right after this.
You're listening to Jimmy Church Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
What's up, revolutionaries? It's me, Jimmy Church. Do you have an IRS or state tax issue? Well, I did, and I called national tax experts. My problems were fixed, done, fini, and man, I got to tell you, it was a relief. National tax experts are a recognized tax office that services clients in all 50 states. It doesn't matter where you live. Give them a call. I'm telling you, they take the time to understand each and every client's individual financial status as well as their financial goals. And that's exactly what you need, my brother, when you're taking on the evil three-letter. So, seriously, give them a call today at 1-877-909-5444. Again, 1-877-909-5444. Or go check out their website, www.nattaxexperts.com. That's NATTAXEXPERTS.com. Tell them Jimmy sent you.
This is KJCR at JimmyChurchRadio.com.
On the Dark Matter Radio Network.
Yeah. Man. I'm going to let everybody know I got this new Brazilian roast. Oh, my goodness gracious. Stuff is so strong. It reminds me of the 80s. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Only on the Dark Matter Radio Network. This is bespoke radio for the masses. Welcome to everybody listening around the world, hither and thither, to and fro, back and forth, north and south, east and west. Let's go. Let's get this one cracking. I got this email from Rick. And check this out. And it hit home. Now, he sent me 3 pages of verbiage, of prose, all well written. But this is the bread and butter right here. America's top 10 exports are: number 1, machinery, $213 billion, 13% total exports. Number 2, electronic equipment, $165 million. Number 3, mineral fuels, including oil, $148 billion. Did I say 165 million? No, billion. 148 billion. Number 4, vehicles, excluding trains, $133 billion. Number 5, aircraft, $115 billion. Number 6, optical, technical, and medical apparatus, $84 billion. Number 7, precious stones, metals, coins, $72 billion. Number 8, plastics, $60 billion. Number 9, organic chemicals, $46 billion. And number 10, pharmaceutical products, $39 billion. Now, he ends the email. How many of those are being used for military purposes? Well, obviously, you know what? Technically, probably all of them. And so I stopped and I thought, now listen to what this is how I work. Let me tell you how I could guarantee that I would be elected president of the United States. Landslide victory. All 50 states. I could probably unify both parties. Create a new one with this platform. After reading this, this is what stood out to me. And I don't believe I'm wrong. Somebody wants to prove me wrong, shoot me an email, tweet, call in. But do you know how many television sets right now are manufactured in the United States? Right now, today, television sets. None. I believe the last one was produced 5 years ago. None. Think about how many television sets were manufactured in this country from whatever, the 30s, 40s, 50s through 1990. Think about that for a second. how much of the American way of life was based on something like that, made in the USA. Think about that. Think about it. Now, how would I be elected president? How would I do that? Think about this for a second. Simple, too. 3 things. Number 1, I would trim 1% out of our budget right now and do the following things. 1%. I would pay construction workers $100,000 a year, every single one of them in this country, and rebuild every street and road. That's what I would do. Every street, road, highway, train track, everything in this country, and I would put back to where every single one, $100,000 a year. Come on, let's do it. Could we do that with 1% of this budget that we've got? Absolutely. You know what else I would do? This would be my platform. Every single school in this country, every single school in this country get knocked down and rebuilt. I would double the teaching staff and double teaching salaries, all with that little 1%. That's what I would do. And then I would follow all of that up with, I would send every single citizen in this country over the age of, pick an age, I don't care, 30 years old, 35, everybody over 35 that is paid into Social Security for, say, 15 years. I'd mail them a check for $100,000. That's what, 50 million checks, 100 million checks? $100,000 each. Spend it as you wish. Down payment for a house. Go buy a $100,000 gold necklace. I don't care. Put that money right back into the economy. Spend it freely. That's what I would do. And you know what? I would win. It just seems that all of this money that I'm looking at here and that we spend and we loan and we fix and we do, and just it drives me nuts. Think about that for a second. Would you vote for me? Anybody? Yeah. I'm looking at a tweet. You could accomplish all of that with 0.0002% of the annual budget. Why doesn't somebody just get it done? I mean, seriously. It blows my mind. It blows my mind. So, anyway, thanks, Rick, for the email. And that's what you do, man. You got me all riled up. But absolutely, it is just a crazy situation. I just don't get it. I don't get it. I look around. We're not manufacturing here. We don't do any. That whole made in the USA. Now, am I just a flag waving, Constitution waving guy? Yeah, I am. I love this country. And I just don't get it. I really don't. All right, this show is about fun, ETs, conspiracies, all the good stuff. Let's keep all of this stuff aside. But I'm just saying, would you vote for me? Would you vote for me? Would you vote if some guy just got up and ran with that? Would you vote for him? You would. I would. That's a guaranteed slam dunk trip to the Oval Office. And in a couple of years, everything just crispy, clean, crackly, clean, schools, teachers, respect. That's what I would do. All right. Man. I got this post today. And so before I get to, I'm going to see if I can read all of this. I'm looking at the studio clock here. Okay, because this is long. So be patient. But I got this from Vinny today on Facebook. And I had not heard this before. It's about Rendlesham. And I contacted Vinny back. I'm like, man, what's going on with this? And you know what? I just decided to read this directly on the air. And so just bear with me. It is long, and I'm trying to get this done in the next 5 minutes. Here it is. Rendlesham Air Force Base, 1980. I was at station at Camp New Amsterdam in 1980, on September 2nd, 1980, and was working Zula alert for the Air Force and the ground mechanic on F-15C fighter jets. That night at approximately 8:30 p.m., both of our jets scrambled for Rendlesham and flew for about an hour and a half. They killed their bingo fuel, whatever that is, and had to return to base. The pilots' flying's names were removed, and we recover the aircraft. And as mechanics' job, it is to download the video set of a UHF cassette and put a new one in for the next flight. The pilots came back that night and instantly started talking about the scramble with us. Both of them indicated that they thought they were chasing them up on an unauthorized helicopter, trying to find it on the radar because of the low fuel and the low speed. However, they did mention that the two objects left the ground level and proceeded to about 35,000 feet within seconds. They told us they actually told the tower without somebody. They thought somebody was shooting missiles up in the air. However, the object stopped at 35,000 feet, hovering briefly, and then took off to 70,000 feet, or until radar could not track them anymore. The videos were downloaded by the crew chief, a friend of mine, and on the recorder, which is all standard protocol, I observed two objects that appeared to be black in color. It was difficult due to the quality of the video and the speed of the fighter jets that they were moving towards the objects at approximately 650 kilometers per hour. The video also records radar tracking, and the object shows approximations according to all aircraft loaded in the memory system, so the fire can just have a match, friend or foe. The computer designated no match for the items. There was also no mode 4 or squawk, friend or foe, that typical aircraft send out under FAA regulations of that time. The pilots, now check this out. It says the pilots reported the objects. They came back approximately 35 miles downrange and simply could not catch up with, even though they were stopping and skipping from 45,000 feet down to 2,000 feet. One pilot, the captain, he was a Texan, and he indicated that he was not a believer in UFOs, but he was that night. There were no men in black. However, there was some closed-door meetings a few days later, but they never asked the ground crew or me or us about the videos or the radar. What I saw in the video recorded from that F-15 HUD, heads-up display by McDonnell Douglas, wasn't night, but it did indicate an object with no wings, triangular in shape, and no FAA regulation lighting, but did have maybe one or two lights. Not sure where on the object, but it was videoed about 1 mile in distance from the F-15. We did notice when the pilots returned that they had indicated their radar had briefly gone offline. The F-15 aircraft were turned around and put back on 15-minute alert status. The next night, I was not there, but they did scramble again back to England. I noticed none of the reports from this airbase indicated, Colonel Halt, that any aircraft jets were scrambled. And I'm indicating that they were. I was at Camp Amsterdam, CNA, Netherlands. There you go. I'm reading now Michael Rad. Hey, Michael Rad. There he is, our contest winner. TweetDeck, everybody congratulate Michael. He says bingo fuel, a pre-briefed amount of fuel for an aircraft that would allow a safe return to base of landing. There you go. All right. So I didn't know that. That's an interesting piece of, now I'm going to try to dig a little bit deeper and find out what this is all about, but I find that very interesting. So there you go. Now, is everybody ready? I got to roll this whole track before Clyde. This is Space Oddity, the world premiere, Space Oddity by Space Boy. Check it out. It's pretty cool. I'm going to play the whole track. No commercials. We're just going to play the whole track. When we're done, come back. Clyde Lewis. Stay with us, everybody. Check this out. Space Oddity by Space Boy.
Ground control to Major Tom. Commencing countdown, engines on. 4, 3. Check ignition, and may God's love be with you.
0. This is ground control to Major Tom. You really made the grade. And the papers want to know who shirt you wear. Now it's time to leave the capsule if you dare. This is Major Tom, the ground control. I'm stepping through the door, and I'm floating in a most peculiar way. And the stars look very different today. Here am I sitting in a tin can, all over the world. Planet Earth is blue, and there's nothing I can do. Though I pass 100,000 miles, I'm feeling very still. And I think my spaceship knows which way to go. Tell my wife I love her very much, she knows. Ground control to Major Tom, your circuit's dead. There's something wrong, can you hear me, Major Tom? Can you hear me, Major Tom? Can you hear as I'm floating in the tin can above the moon? Planet Earth is blue, and there's nothing I can do.
And that was Space Boy with Space Oddity. Playing a little FM late night DJ. This is Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. This is Bespoke Radio for the Masses. What you want to do, you want to follow us on Twitter right now, at JChurchRadio. Go and do it. At JChurchRadio. Simple. But then hashtag DMRadioNet. And I see the congratulations coming in for Michael Rad. He's in the house tonight. Michael, congratulations. And, wow, I'm excited. So we've got Clyde Lewis in about 2 minutes. Clyde, host of Ground Zero. Clyde went up to Washington, and he was filming. When I was on his show a few weeks back, he was telling me about this documentary that he's working on about Maury Island. And its connection with Kenneth Arnold and everything else. So he goes up with his crew to shoot this documentary. And knowing Clyde with his setup and the amount of people, I'm sure it was, a pretty significant production. And they're up there doing everything. While after they're done, they pack up. The crew splits, the production crew. There's a few people left. And I'll let Clyde, tell the entire story. But there's a few people left, and they're, the night before they heard some crazy laughter, hyenas, I think is how he described it. And so there was some commotion going on outside. Here's Clyde now. Let's do it. Okay, we're live here. How you guys doing? Okay, we're good. Hey, Larry, just to let you know, we're running live, so the live feed is just okay. We're going.
Remember, no feedback.
I should have already killed it.
You got to love this. This is live Clyde, you let me know when you got me. This is awesome. See, they're different. They're running a real show up there.
Craig Lewis. You are listening to Ground Zero. You know, I refuse to think that everything in this world is taken care of, that nothing slips through the cracks. I also refuse to believe that there are no secrets. There are secrets. It's been proven time and time and again that secrets can be taken to the grave. That's why we're in the business we're in. That's why Jimmy Church is in the business he's in. Yes, Jimmy Church of Fade to Black Radio.
Right on.
Man, tonight we're going to do a simulcast, so I think we're going to go to him right now as he's doing his show and I'm doing my show. Jimmy, are you there?
I'm here. I'm here, Clyde.
Fantastic, man. We're doing this without any problems, and that's awesome. So
you got to love technology, Clyde. You got to love technology.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So, okay, so you decided to call this picnic together, and you didn't bring the potato salad, so I'm just going to sit here and sip on my soda. So what's up in your world, and what's going on?
Hey, my world is boring, Clyde. It's all about you right now.
Really? Why is that?
I got it. You know what? Okay, this is the deal. We've got about 6 minutes and 6 minutes, so I'm gonna indulge myself, and I'm gonna take the first 6. Okay.
Okay, great.
What happened? Now, you're up there filming. You're doing your Maury Island documentary, and
talking about ESETI?
Yeah, let's do that first. Let's do that first. And
okay.
And what was cool about it was you had a tip off the night before with you described it as hyenas. And so let's just start from there. I had already went over with our audience last night and prepped them a little bit today on the show. So let's start with the hyena laughter.
Okay, so we were doing some filming we did one part called The First Wave. It's about going to Maury Island. We went to Maury Island. And so the second wave was about Kenneth Arnold and about how he saw these UFOs flying over Mount Rainier, and they actually flew towards Mount Adams, which is this other mountain that is in this beautiful area of Klickitat County, and it borders on Skamania County.
Right.
Well, these are two very famous counties because it's home to Bigfoot, which I think is kind of interesting. And so we went there, but we weren't there to look for Bigfoot. We were there to look for UFOs, and so we had gotten we got some really great footage, night vision footage of the mountain opening up and lights coming out of it. It's just some amazing stuff. And so we had a camera crew there. Actually, we had 2 camera crews there. We had one that's my camera crew, and then Olaf Phillips came from California. He came from Northern California. Olaf Phillips, of course, has produced a lot of shows. He's written for several magazines, including Paranoia and several others.
Right.
So he was there. We had Larry Overman from the Sci-Fi Channel's Ghost Mine there. We had several other people. We were all there, and we were there for one thing, and that's UFOs. Well, I was tired. I mean, I was up. It was a great night. We saw a lot of great things in the sky. I was up until about 1 or 2 in the morning. And I kind of, drug myself back to my cabin. And I'm laying there in bed, and I can't sleep because I'm hearing this. It was kind of a laughter. And it was, I could only describe it as being like, it sounded like, how the Joker laughed?
Right.
When he's like laughing, it kind of sounded like that a little bit.
Little creepy.
Yeah, a little creepy. It sounded human, but then it kind of sounded like a child. It's hard to describe. It just sounded like something that was not of this world. And so I decided, oh, hell, I'm too tired to care. So I just went to sleep, And the next night, we are doing the same thing. And my buddy Roger Cluton, who's with the Northwest Coast Recon, he's the ghost investigators there. And his significant other, the woman he was with, she was freaking out the whole time. She was just being all, like she couldn't settle down, kind of like everywhere, doing this whole, I don't know if I can handle being up here thing. And then she went back to this yurt, and it's in this area of its orchard. And we heard her scream, and he ran to her, and we didn't know what was going on. And she says, I just saw something huge in the shadows. I don't know what it was. It was Bigfoot, she says. We were kind of like laughing, going, yeah, okay, you saw Bigfoot. Yeah,
right.
What happened is that there was this deer that charged Roger. And so it charged him, and he said it jumped over him. So it had to have jumped like 6 or 7 feet above him to get over to the other side of him. to get away from whatever it was that was in the orchard. Well, the next day, I was talking with Olaf, and I was talking with, because we were there 2 days. I was talking with Olaf, I was talking with Larry, and I said, what do you think? Do you think she saw Bigfoot? Do you think that was something? And they were saying that they saw what appeared to be two figures walking up the side of the mountain, and they were really big because they could see them. I think it was like 10 miles away, 20 miles away on the ridge, or it was 14 miles away, actually, 14 miles away to the ridge. And so I'm like going, okay, this is interesting. You know, people are like seeing all kinds of shadows and whatever. Well, the next morning, of course, is Sunday morning, and we were there the whole weekend, and we had to get packed up. My two camera guys, Brian and Wes, already left. They left the night before, so I had no idea they had left. Larry and Olaf were at the other side of the camp, and I don't know, they were getting ready to leave early because I saw Larry leave his cabin early, and I think they were getting ready to take off, and we were discussing with James Gillen if we were going to have breakfast with him. And so instead of that, I just decided, hell, you know me, I'm a coffee achiever, and I'm dragging, so I have to go in and get myself a big old cup of nasty, disgusting, chew-away coffee.
Right.
So I went into the library, and I'm sitting down, and I'm sipping my coffee, and there's this guy named Kars, who is, he works with Northwest Coast Recon. He's a friend of my friend, Sarah, and she was there sitting on the couch. Sarah's sitting on the couch with Kars. Kars is sitting there. I'm talking with Dina, and I'm talking with Roger. And I look over at the door, and there's like this, you know, doorway. It leads to this orchard, and I see this thing run by and it was like, boom, right there, runs right by me, and I yell, and this is what came right out of my mouth. I go, Bigfoot! I just saw Bigfoot. That's what I thought.
Oh man, how far away outside the door?
It was just right outside the door, but it was running by. It was like it was running away from something, and it ran fast. And that's what I yelled. It's a Bigfoot. I guess everybody heard me because as soon as I said that, everybody came rushing. And Carr said he saw it run by. He said he saw it out of the corner of his eye. So he chased after it, went up the pathway to the woods until he got lost in the woods. And then he had to come back down and find his way back. But he went up after it. And then I just stood there going, oh, no. And this is what I thought after I saw it. Oh, no. And my friend Sarah says, what? I said, I just saw Bigfoot. She says, yeah, you should be happy. I says, no, I'm not.
Oh, no.
And she says, why? I says, are you kidding? I just saw Bigfoot. I'm going to tell everybody that I saw Bigfoot because it was exciting for me. But I didn't have one shred of evidence that I saw Bigfoot. Not a picture, nothing. Because I'm sitting here in my shorts drinking coffee. You know, I haven't even showered yet. I'm just sitting there in the library drinking coffee and thinking to myself, everybody's leaving. They're party poopers. They don't want to stay here. So I had to go grab Roger because he was packing things up in his car, getting ready to leave. I says, Roger, you got to come here. He came in with his smartphone, basically pointed it to the path, and you can see in the stuff that he took the pathway, and it's just you can see how it's all been flattened, and you see how there's right foot, then left. So what happened is that the Bigfoot ran right foot, left foot, and then it went left foot over to get away from a boulder that was in the middle of the way, and then went right foot, left foot up again.
So now you let me jump in real quick before we do run out of time. You did one interesting description. You said it was like a baby Bigfoot, like Michael J. Fox in Teen Wolf.
Teen Wolf. Yeah.
Now, so it was Michael J. Fox minus the clothes, right? This is
minus the clothes. Yeah, exactly. It was like there was no clothes on it. It was like Michael J. Fox in Teen Wolf, and I even made the comment, and I don't know if anybody remembered. Remember Chaka?
Yeah.
Chaka from Land of the Lost.
Yes. Yeah.
How many yeah, it was Chaka. It looked like Chaka from. I mean, I didn't use that because I didn't want to be too esoteric because I don't know if anybody remembers Chaka from Land of the Lost, but it reminded me of Chaka.
Skinny.
It was skinny. It but had a lot of hair, and it looked like its face had been smashed in by a shovel. It was kind of the weirdest thing. That's the thing that freaked me out was that. It didn't have an ape face. I mean, I was expecting it to have an ape face, and it didn't. It had a face that was kind of smashed in. It looked like it was, for me, it just looked like it had just features that were like kind of pushed inward instead of protruding outward. No protruding jaw, no protruding eyeballs. You know, like the brow was not protruding or anything. It just looked like it was all kind of sunk in, and then everything else was all hair.
Now I'm going to be the radio host guy. Any facial hair, or was it a straight face?
It had hair. It had hair up to what would probably be a midway point, and then it had hair around the eyes. But like I said, it didn't have a brow. I didn't see a brow.
Right.
It just looked like some sunken in face. It looked like like I said, it looked like it'd been hit by a shovel or something, or somebody had stomped all over it, and it kind of had a flat nose, and everything was sunken in the head.
Any chance of? I'm watching the clock here, and we're going to run out of time. I have so many questions. So, any chance of somebody jumping in a suit and just pulling a fast one on you? Did anybody know that you were there?
Yeah, everybody knew I was there. In fact, somebody put up a sign saying, "Clyde Lewis, we're watching you." I mean, yeah, people knew I was there, and there is a chance that somebody could put on a suit. But here's the deal: we chased after that thing,
right?
And I had cars chase after him until it got into the woods. And so, if it was a guy in a suit, he certainly ran too fast because the guy was, the guy chasing him was a wiry, athletic guy,
right?
And too damn fast, and he got into the woods, and he was way around the woods. And everybody, including two men that I could have mistaken to be Bigfoot. One guy's named Nathan, the other guy named Nate. In fact, I even made mention of it. I go, look, Bigfoot has tattoos. It could have been them, but it wasn't them because they were standing there wondering what the hell was wrong with me. So it wasn't them. So everybody was accounted for, unless somebody just showed up out of nowhere and decided to run through the orchard dressed in a Bigfoot costume. So
now you're a big fan of the Patterson film. You and I have talked about that. And any semblance of the gait, the walk, the run, was there anything that reminded you of that?
No, that's the weirdest thing. No. It ran. I guess you could say the lower legs bent differently, and it looked kind of abnormal. But it ran like it was running away from something. It was lighter hair than the Gimlin Patterson film. It was just
Wow. Yeah. And now you get to wear the jacket of I didn't have a camera. You're that guy now, and I
have to wear the ass hat that says I didn't have a camera.
right. Because
I'll wear it probably with my tinfoil hat too.
Well, the thing is, Clyde, you talk to people about the stuff all the time. So do I. Yes. And it's always the same question. Well, did you get a pic? Did your friends get a pic? No, we didn't.
No, we didn't. And that's the bad thing. It's the fish that got away. Hey, Jimmy, they're telling me I have to go. You have a great time. I'll talk to you soon, okay?
Hey, Clyde, all the best. We'll be in touch, man.
Take care, buddy. Bye-bye.
Clyde Lewis, Ground Zero.
Keep it right here on Ground Zero. Don't go away.
All right. Thanks, Clyde. Wow. That's a crazy story. And thank you, Clyde. And that was great. We knew that we were going to run out of time. We wanted to talk about a couple of other things, and we didn't get a chance to get to it. But that's a crazy story. And like I said, now Clyde gets to be that guy that didn't get the camera shot. And, he doesn't need his own publicity. He doesn't need any of that. He's got his show on Premiere, and things are great. And it's a growing audience and all of that. So he doesn't need anything. It's just something that happened. And talking to Clyde over the last couple of days about this, I think not only do I believe it really happened, but the question is, could it have been somebody in a suit like the Patterson film? I believe the Patterson film is legit and real. I'm saying that was always the claim, that somebody was running around in a suit in the Patterson film. So you got to ask that question, because Clyde is a very visible guy, and you're up there with a couple of camera crews, and you're doing interviews and shooting documentaries over a few days. Everybody knows you're there. Is that possible? But he says no. He saw what he saw. And I got to say, that is a crazy story. Hey, did everybody like Space Oddity? That kind of blew by me. I didn't catch that. Let's take a break. And I want to it's queued up. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to take a quick break. And when we come back, I want to talk about the other subject that Clyde and I were going to talk about. This is Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Bespoke radio for the masses. Shoot us an email to jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. Follow us on Twitter @JChurchRadio. Hashtag DMRadioNet. Back right after this.
Way out here, we listen to Jimmy Church on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
Dark Matter.
Dark Matter. Dark Matter. Dark Matter. Dark Matter.
You're listening to Fade to Black
on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
¿Qué tal, mis amigos? Yo soy Mario Carson, el tiburón, y los invito para que escuchen a mi buen amigo Jimmy Church Radio. ¡Claro que sí! Hoy
Oi, oi, I'm Reese Evans. You're listening to Jimmy Church. This is Revolution. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution is on radio. Ciao.
All right, everybody, welcome back. Fade to Black, the Friday edition. All right. Only on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Bespoke radio for the masses. Tailor-made, custom fit, just for you. It's very humbling to be here. And I hope everybody's having a great time. Okay, again, congratulations to our Contact in the Desert winners, Michael Rad, Jason Lamp, and Ian Fowles. And I believe we have now reached out and contacted everybody. And there you go. Congratulations. Really looking forward to it. And we've got some pretty cool things planned out there. And I can't wait for everybody to come out, hang out, jump on the radio with us, and just have a great time. And now, one of the subjects that Clyde and I were going to talk about, which we didn't get around to, but a couple of the subjects were, and I brought this up at the end of the show last night, which is this. Why are planes falling out of the sky right now? I don't understand that. And with today, I was spinning around on the web and reading email and everybody's comments about this. But something strange is going on. When MH17 was shot out of the sky, I had said last week on when that happened, I'd said then that's all you need is this kind of image in some sicko's mind. You know, that's it. That's it. What an idea that is. Check that out. Never thought about that before. And I could just see guys outside of every airport just sitting there with a shoulder-fired missile, just picking stuff out of the sky. Nothing would be safe now. Just plant the seed of the idea. And then coming along with that is this wave of crashes. The Algeria, Mali, Taiwan, well, of course, 17, MH370. And is this something that is just now going to occur? Today, I don't know if you saw the video of SunWest, the plane that flew out of Toronto, had to make a U-turn because some crazy guy was on board. It had nothing to do with it, but I'm just saying, nothing to do with what I'm talking about. But it's everything that what I'm talking about, which is, how can you fly right now? And why would the media, who is, reading off a script supplied to them from somebody else, suddenly just put this fear in flying? Because I have it. I don't know what's going on. Radar doesn't work. Nobody knows how to fly through a storm anymore. Nobody knows how to fly around a storm. MH17 was shot out of the sky because it was diverted from a flight path of a storm that was occurring to the south of the Ukraine. So they were forced into the flight path that they were in. Why they didn't go south of the storm instead of north is beyond me. I don't get it. And I don't understand. I feel really weird. So Clyde, and maybe we'll get him back on the show next week to talk about this. But Clyde is doing his own investigation into this. And yeah, there's just some weird stuff going on, and I don't get it, and I don't understand it. I really, really don't. So, all right. Again, congratulations to everybody who just won. Michael Rad. Saw that name earlier today. I was like, Michael Red, he's a Fadernaut. Wow. Very cool. Brad Beining sent me an email right before the show that he cannot make it, and personal reasons, but he cannot make it. So maybe, just maybe, Brad, if it's okay, I'll talk to a contact and see if we can do another drawing. Or maybe you can donate your ticket and give it to somebody else. I will check into that. If you're cool with that, Brad, I know you are. But if you can't make it, kind of would, just hate to have that go to waste. So I don't know. Maybe you want to donate it. Maybe you want to give it away. Maybe we'll just give it away to somebody on the show. I'll check with contact. I don't see why not. A ticket's a ticket, right? And we'll give it to somebody that would love to go, and that is in the area, that is guaranteed to go. So, Brad, I'm sorry about the personal stuff. I get that. I understand that. It is what it is. All right, and let's see. Now, tonight, Todd Murphy's going to be on, and we are going to cover my favorite subjects. And this is the first time that we are going to be able to do a full show on the God helmet, reincarnation, psychic skills, out-of-body experiences. And I've always, and I've talked about it enough on this show, reincarnation is a freaky thing for me. And the reason why I think not only is reincarnation possible and it is real, but I think it's directly connected to, and we're going to find out tonight when we get Mr. Murphy on, which is deja vu. And I'm going to talk to him about that. Deja vu is real. Why do I think? Because it happens to me. Probably every day. Happens to you. Probably every day. What is the connection? Well, look. If you have a deja vu, that is just something that has been going on in your life for maybe years, the same thing, and suddenly it happens. Well, you have to stop and think about that. That you have seen the future for years. The future. How is that possible? How is it possible? It could be something that bona fide, that is about to happen word for word, and you've had this same reoccurring dream and vision for years, a month, a long time, but it's the future. And if that is real, because it is, it happens all the time, how is that possible? How is it possible when the future hasn't happened yet? Is it time travel? I don't know. But the future hasn't happened yet, so how can you possibly know that this is about to happen? And then, boom, it does. And it's word for word. And you're standing there stunned. You know what's about to happen next, and it happens. And then and you get through the experience, and whoever's standing in front of you is going, hey, are you okay? Are you here? And you're like, man, whoa, deja vu. Well, that is an indication of psychic skills. A lot of things come into play. If that is real, then if real to you, then that means everything else is in the paranormal. Think about that for a second. It's a very, very, very important subject, one that I have been intrigued with since I was a kid. Before I even knew what deja vu was, 5 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old, and this stuff is happening to you all the time. What is the psychic connection with that? I'll give you the other classic example before I head to the break. When was the last time, probably this week, when was the last time you thought of somebody that you haven't thought of in years, and that name pops in your head and you recall a memory and everything is cool, and then boom, the phone rings. An email comes in. Somebody else goes, hey, you know what? What's Bob up to? I can't believe you just said that. I haven't thought of Bob in 2 years. And I thought about him today, and I cannot believe you just brought up his name. That's a psychic skill. That's the real deal. And we're going to talk about all of that tonight, and I cannot wait. When I come back, I'm reading Lynn Lewis. I had a nightmare as a kid for years, Had a boyfriend at 18, and it all tied in. And we broke up, and no nightmare. That's exactly what I'm talking about. This is Fade to Black, the Friday edition. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Follow us on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Hashtag DMRadioNet. The spoke radio for the masses, only on the Dark Matter Radio Network. When I come back, Todd Murphy.
What's up? My name's Brian Taylor, Ninja Badass Extraordinaire, and this is JimmyChurchRadio.com.
JJCR in your face.
JimmyChurchRadio.com on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
Oh, yeah. Fade to Black. Only on the Dark Matter Radio Network. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Let's get this one cracking. I'm excited. Let's just get straight to it. Let's just jump straight to it. Todd Murphy is a neuroscientist that has discovered how the brain creates mystic experiences and spirituality. He is the author of the only concept of reincarnation ever published in a scientific journal. The director of the Laurentian University's Behavioral Neurosciences program, Dr. Michael Persinger, endorses his book. Todd R. Murphy is an active member of this research group, which developed the God Helmet and successfully created telepathy in a laboratory setting. I would like to welcome to the program Todd R. Murphy. Todd, how are you, sir?
I'm all right. How are you?
It's it's a dynamic evening here on Fade to Black, and the thing is, and is it okay? Can I just run with Todd? Is that okay? I could do Professor and okay, Todd. Reincarnation, and I don't know if you were just listening onto the program before the break, but reincarnation for me is something that is real. And for me, I have always connected with the thought of the reality of reincarnation because of my experiences, real experiences with deja vu. And if that type of psychic skill and paranormal activity is real to me, because I know it occurs, then that opens the door to me for all of that paranormal fringe thing that people either discredit or believe in. But to me, if one thing is possible, then I think everything is possible with the brain.
Well, to a large extent, I agree. But the reason that I was able to get that paper on reincarnation published in that journal, and it is indeed a peer-reviewed journal, the Journal for Near-Death Studies, is I believe it's because I brought a new question to the scientific arena. And that is, if reincarnation is true, if it's a real human behavior, however hard it might be to observe it, and Charles Darwin was right, then isn't reincarnation an evolutionary adaptation that contributed to the survival of our species at some point in our evolutionary history?
Okay. I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. Maybe I did. I'm sorry, but that's a broad stroke of the pen, though. I mean, that is a real broad stroke of the pen. So I need you to expand on that thought.
Okay. Well, we are a social species. And if you look at all of the traditions that deal in reincarnation, primarily in Hinduism and Buddhism, although that's not my starting point in the arguments that I lay out, you'll find that most of the things that are considered good karma or bad karma are actually behaviors that we carried out when we were relating to other people. We're a social species. And we're also an hierarchical species, but I'll get back to that in a minute.
Okay.
The place that I looked for evidence to build the hypothesis, evidence to support the hypothesis, and that's the correct word for it. It's not a theory. It's not something that the scientific community accepts broadly. It is, well, it's an hypothesis. It's an idea that I lay in front of the scientific community and say, more or less, how about this? The evidence came from near-death experiences, and I consider them to be the only valid source of information about what happens after we die. I consider near-death experiences to be a reflection of the actual death process. Only about a third of the people who die clinically and then come back to life report them. They have some things in common, and I think that what's going on is that most of the people who have these experiences, they have the experiences, but they don't remember them. And saying that because a certain person died clinically and then came back to life, but didn't report a near-death experience, and that means that they didn't have one, is as absurd as saying that a person who wakes up in the morning and doesn't remember their dreams never entered REM sleep. They never dreamt in the first place. It's ridiculous. And with near-death experiences, I think there's a lot of people who have the experiences, but when they come back, the experiences were so far, the state of consciousness they had to be in order to have the experience was so far from normal states that they simply couldn't remember them. There's a word for this in neuroscience. It's called state-specific memories. The experiences happen in an altered state of consciousness, and for most people, you have to be in an altered state of consciousness in order to remember them. But something happens in the course of a near-death experience. There's a thing called the life review, and that is what I consider to be the critical component for the mechanism of reincarnation and the reason why humans evolved the death process as we experience it in the first place. And during the life review, you re-experience your life sometimes in amazingly short periods of time. Your life flashes before your eyes. You are confronted with certain behaviors that you carried out when you were still alive. Mm-hmm. It takes many, many forms. In hunting and gathering societies, according to one Australian researcher named Kelleher, who published in the Journal for Near-Death Studies as well, I think that he was right when he wrote that for hunting and gathering societies, many times the life review is presented symbolically, but one way or another, we are confronted with the behaviors during our life, and we have feelings about those behaviors. Even if the entire life review, covering 50, 70 years of a person's life, takes place in what feels like 5 or 10 seconds, we still have distinct emotional responses to the things that we did when we were alive. And if we review that behavior, one specific behavior during the life review in the course of the death process, and we feel good about it, then that is a behavior, or rather a state of consciousness, that motivates a behavior that we want to bring back to our next life. We want to repeat that. And if we see ourselves doing something bad or something that just made a lot of trouble for us in our lives, then the state of consciousness that inspired it is one not to repeat. So we go through a lifetime of our behavior, significant behavior. We don't cover every instance of brushing your teeth during a life review.
Right.
But we look at the behaviors of a lifetime. We see how we feel about them, and the ones that are tagged for repetition become more probable in the next life, and the ones that are tagged for avoidance become less probable.
When you have, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So, no, go ahead with your question, please.
Well, when you, with a life review, and I understand, the 5 or 10 second, fly, is this a visual review, or is it more of an emotional review?
It's a visual review in most cases. I don't, there have been literally thousands of near-death experiences recorded, and hundreds, if not a few thousand of them, actually published in books and magazines and so forth. And I wouldn't want to make a sweeping statement about all of them. Right. Neither would I want to claim that I'd read them all.
Right.
I know of one researcher alone, PMH Atwater, who's written several books on near-death experiences. Her approach is very creative. It's extremely logical and evidence-based, but it's not She doesn't use scientific methods. In fact, she says she uses police investigation methods. That's worth noticing because in police investigations, we take a person's word as true unless we have reason to doubt it.
Right.
For many skeptical scientists, all of this kind of thing is regarded as nonsense unless there's a specific reason to take it seriously. Her orientation is quite different. And she has interviewed, last time I spoke to her, which was several years ago, she has interviewed over 5,000 people and collected their stories of their near-death experiences. And I wouldn't want to presume to say anything that makes it seem like I know all of them. But in the overwhelming majority, it is a visual reenactment. And there are two very interesting variations on that. One of them is where a person re-experiences their lives from the point of view of the victims of their maladaptive or inappropriate or just plain bad behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So that there's a famous case, Danny and Brinkley. Now, Danny and Brinkley wrote a book, I think it's called Saved by the Light. And later on he was interviewed and he admitted that he had exaggerated some of his claims. I don't believe he was ever accused of falsifying it, but he added some extra icing to the cake. But one thing that he said, and I seriously doubt it's exaggerated too much, is that when he was a soldier in Vietnam, a kind of black ops soldier, and he was doing assassinations of North Vietnamese officers, he would sneak into a village and take one person out. He'd have a specific target. And he mentioned that he would re-experience the event from the point of view of the person that they killed, including their thoughts as they lay dying. So they would be thinking about their wife and their child, and the child's going to be told that daddy's never coming home. The wife grieves, looking at her, 80 cents a day to live on. It was a very poor economy in Vietnam at that time,
Mm-hmm.
and thinking, how will she ever manage it? And, the romantic aspect of her life was over. It doesn't usually work that way, but when you lose a partner, it feels like everything in that whole range of experiences ended. So he experienced the grief and the shock and the horror of the people that he hurt with his behaviors. Another variation, and I only encountered it once, and this was a person that I interviewed firsthand. They re-experienced all of their actions from their life from the point of view of the person that they acted on, but it emphasized the good that he had done, rather like Frank Capra's It's a Wonderful Life.
Right.
So that he saw just how much good he had done. So he helped a woman get through a difficult phase in her life and then saw her go on to accomplish good things, including things that helped other people, who then helped other people and then helped other people. And the theme of his near-death experience in his life review was that our actions ripple out much farther than we ever would imagine while we're alive. So yes, we see our own behavior, we re-experience our own behavior, but in some cases, and I don't know what distinguishes them or what makes them work differently from the first type, we re-experience our lives as it impacted on other people. This is a rare exception.
Does the life review, excuse me for jumping in, but does the life review happen every single time somebody dies?
Well, in near-death experiences, many of them don't unfold to the point where they reach that. There's a typical sequence of near-death experiences, and this is the one that we find in the West and in the books published in America and the data gathered in America. I gathered some data in Thailand and found that their near-death experiences were very different. But typically it begins with a person having an out-of-body experience. This is very typical. No near-death experience ever matches this exactly. But they have an out-of-body experience. They look down, they see their own body, they realize, seeing their own corpse, that they're dead.
Right.
Then from there, they go through the tunnel or into a void, an infinite black space that often has a tiny point of light in it, unimaginably far away. And they move through this infinity of space, this darkness, but it's not just darkness. It has a real quality to it. It is silent, and yet it seems to say something to you. It you're not touching anything, but you feel a texture. It's vibrant, it's alive, it seems electric to the people going through it. You go through that void, more commonly the tunnel, which is a little less evocative. There's less extra stuff going on to mention. But you go through the tunnel, and then you come to the end of the tunnel, and then you emerge into the light. And waiting for you in the light, again, this is typical, you meet your dead friends and relatives. So people you know who have died are there waiting for you on the other side. And if your Uncle George, that you were very fond of when you were 6 years old, is dead, and you meet him again, you must be dead. Otherwise, how would you meet him? So you get there, and the light is joyous and loving and accepting. It cocoons you, it envelops you, and bathes you in a warmth, a metaphorical warmth. It's an emotional warmth. You feel that everything is absolutely perfect. You've come home. You're exactly where you were always truly supposed to be. It feels right to be there. Then after the meeting with your dead friends and relatives, then you meet what the researchers have come to call the being of light. And in most near-death experiences in the West, where God is at the center of our religions, people unhesitantly identify this being as God. Many of them call it an angel. Many of them feel it's a being and they don't know who it is. But most commonly, it's God. And a lot of people see God, the Judeo-Christian, radiant, shining being on the throne in the center of heaven. Others see angels. I know one man, he's a holy man and a lifetime friend. And many people recognize him as a holy man. And I can't tell you what he does that's holy, but you just get a certain feeling when you're in his presence. And he knew a woman who had a near-death experience, and she saw him. And he wasn't dead.
Interesting.
But she saw him as the being of light. So we've been through meetings with spirits. We've been through this unexpressible joy. And now we come to God. And then in the presence of God, who quite literally, as the Christians teach us he does, says, all your sins are forgiven as you review your life. So you're in the presence of the being of light. After you've met him, then you experience all of the things that you did in your life. And in the presence of this God, whose forgiveness is so absolute that no amount of self-esteem could ever bring you into shame, then you see what you did when you were alive. And after that, there's another phase that often comes. It's called the transcendent experience, and that's one where people feel that the mysteries of the universe are revealed to them. All the questions that they were sure would be answered when they die are answered. And they're given all kinds of interesting ways to access the information symbolically by looking through a book, the Akashic, sometimes called the Akashic Records. And these are all phases, and they do unfold in a certain order. So if someone is dead and they begin to go through the death process and they are resuscitated before they come to the life review, then the life review won't be part of their near-death experience that they will then later report.
Right.
So we don't know if they're present in all near-death experiences because not all of them reach that point. But my guess is that, like dreams that we have but don't remember, everyone undergoes a life review of one kind or another. That's when we see our behavior and our adaptive and maladaptive behaviors are sorted out. We take the information about how to behave with other people. That's packaged into a thing that for convenience we can call karma, and that's carried into the person's next life or into a next life.
Do people in a near-death experience, let's just say somebody's obnoxious or maybe loudmouth, somebody like me, self-assertive, out of control.
A prince among men.
Right. And then you come out of something like that. Do they change or do they continue on with, their obnoxiousness?
Well, people change after near-death experiences. It's very common for people who've had them to suddenly find that they're completely dissatisfied with the life that they've led. and they will often throw themselves back into educating themselves, studying world religions, science, in a couple of cases that I've read of, anthropology, and trying to understand their own mind and the world they live in, because once it's over, they are a different person. And what seems to happen, and this is my best guess, is that the process itself and the activity that it forces in the brain is so strong that it actually blasts away the synapses that would ordinarily inhibit these kinds of thinking and these kinds of perceptions. So when they come back, instead of being equipped for being a better person in their next life, they are now compelled to be a better person in what remains of this life. And
could this be caused from these type of visions? Could it be some dramatic chemical change that goes on in the brain, and it's a consistent hallucination that happens with everybody else as their body and brain start to shut down, and maybe there's some weird electrical things that are going on? Is that a possibility, or?
Well, first of all, when you say, is it a chemical change? The answer has to be yes. Such a dramatic experience will create a big difference in your brain chemistry, and far less dramatic compared to near-death experiences, but very dramatic compared to our ordinary moments is falling in love. And that's already known to change brain chemistry. And then, of course, romantic disappointments, finding out that the person that you're in love with is with someone else, or that they just don't want you, and it becomes an unrequited love, that can lead you into a depression deep enough that it will actually leave its mark on your personality. But I don't think that these are accidental changes. Mm-hmm. They're not random in any way. This death process that I believe is part of our evolutionary strategy is just that. It's part of our evolutionary strategy. It is pre-programmed for our brains to go through these changes when we die. And it's only in the last few decades that we had any chance of resuscitating any significant numbers of people. Prior to, 1970, 1980, most everyone who died stayed dead. So these chemical changes, obviously, in that case, wouldn't last very long. They would endure only as long as the death process went on, and then as the brain shut down, so would its chemical and electrical processing.
Right, right.
But now that I've outlined very briefly the stages for near-death experiences, I can tell your listeners what the core idea of this book is.
Okay, before we get to that, I've got like two other very important questions that I think everybody needs to have answered.
Okay.
So you die, you go, you meet your relatives and your friends, and I understand that. How long, there's two questions that come out of this. How long are you there before you depart again and are reincarnated? That's the first part of the question. And the second part of the question is, how come your relatives and your friends are there and they haven't reincarnated yet?
Well,
okay, so let's do the first part of the question first before we move on to the book, because I think these are questions that we all have. I mean,
I agree.
Are you in heaven for eternity, or are you going to go back out and start this cycle over again? And how long are you there? And why is your cousin Bobby there? Why hasn't he been sent back for round 2?
Well, how long does it take? I don't have any evidence to base an answer on. In Tibetan Buddhism, the tradition is, I believe, 48 days from the time of death until you take rebirth. But that is a traditional answer, and it's from a religion, which means that it's not scientific evidence. It's a religious teaching. But there is a period of time, and I don't know how long it is. I was told by an American Theravadan Buddhist monk that I met in Bangkok that as soon as the death process is over, the reincarnation process begins. That's what the scriptures in his religion say.
Mm-hmm.
And because reincarnation is not an observable behavior, there are no observations that can give us any clue as to how long it takes. But the monk whose answer I liked the best, and that was that American Southeast Asian monk, is that there's no gap. The process is continuous. One moment you are one being in one life. The next moment you are another being in another life. Time passes along the way, he says, but you have not yet been reconstructed to perceive it. And this points to another one of these Buddhist teachings that I do deal with in my book at some length and in a couple of places, that the sense of self does not exist. There is no true self. You end with the end of one death process, and then to your perception, you are immediately recreated with the next one. And the interval between the two could be milliseconds, or it could be centuries. Asking if you will reincarnate, according to this model, is like asking if vision reincarnates. And no Buddhist teacher, no Hindu teacher has ever grappled with the problem of whether or not vision reincarnates. It's taken for granted that your capacity for vision and visual perception grows as you gestate and are born and then grow up.
Does your personality also reincarnate? In other words, if you're obnoxious in this life, whoever you are, does that obviously the memories probably don't transfer and reincarnate, but are you the same person?
How do I put this? The collection of states of consciousness and behaviors that go with him that are preserved for repetition,
right,
and those that are preserved for avoidance in many ways will constitute a personality. So if you're really obnoxious, if you're the party animal in one life and you're drunk all the time and you wear a t-shirt, a sweatshirt with the sleeves torn off, and you pour stuff all over yourself and you insult everyone with crude language and then laugh about it, you are liable to get an unpleasant awakening during your life review, and then you will not reincarnate with that trait or with that trait anywhere near as dominant.
Interesting. So that's what happened to me. All right, now I got that figured out. With are you familiar with the case of little James Leininger? No. Okay. Well, in his situation, and I want to know if you've because I think he was a young boy. I think he was at the time he was 2 or 3 years old, and he starts talking about planes. He's really fascinated with World War II planes. He could name every type of World War II aircraft. And he started naming ships and an aircraft carrier, but he's very young. He's 2, 3 years old. And his parents go and research this, and they find out that the names that he's coming up with and the planes and so forth, that he was a pilot in World War II that had a very, very violent, crashed. He crashed and died. Well, and that's kind of like, it's not quite proof positive, but it's certainly something that it's a case study where you have to, stop and look and go, wow, okay, this, yes. You have to stop. Have you ever had a case like that from a young child that just came up with stuff that they couldn't possibly have read because they haven't learned how to read yet?
Mm-hmm.
Have you had a case like that?
I haven't met anyone like that, but there are some very well-known and very well-documented cases like that. His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who wrote a foreword to my book, is probably the best known among them. He was able to identify objects that he owned in his previous incarnation, had memories of things that had happened to him in his previous life, but all of this faded away, as near as I can tell, when he got older. Quite recently, compared to that, I think probably in the last 10 or 20 years, someone asked him, "Do you remember your past lives?" And his answer was, "Remember my past life? I don't remember what I had for breakfast."
Right.
So
I totally
I think there is a period when some people have the capacity to have actual memories from their past life appear. But that isn't what the mechanism of reincarnation is built out of, either in my model or in the Buddhist traditions. It is our states of consciousness, our capacity for cleaving to karmically good behavior or avoiding karmically bad behavior, adaptive and maladaptive behaviors,
right,
that is at the center of that which reincarnates. And this is always a big conundrum in the traditional religions. If you go to a Buddhist teacher and say, tell me what reincarnates, most of the time the answer will be quite confusing. The people want to hear that they will reincarnate, because that's what's going to give them a sense of safety that only immortality can confer. You don't die.
Why?
You continue on. I don't think that's true. I think we stop and then we are recreated. We are a function. We are a brain function, but it's a brain function that we experience so seamlessly that it's just as though we never stop.
Here's the it's the 10-cent question. It gets asked all the time, but you're the guy, so I need to hear it.
Okay.
Hear the answer, which is why does everybody, their past life is, a queen, somebody famous, a king, a knight, and not a cook or a cook's helper. 500 years ago.
Why are they not remembering the past life of an English peasant who lived his entire life in a little hut and never went outside of his home village and could not read or write and watched his children die? Most of them die when they were very young and all the rest of it. And I think the reason is that those actually don't have much to do. In most cases, they don't have anything to do with past lives. But the belief in reincarnation and past lives, even if it is a preference that they've indulged, or just a pleasant idea, more pleasant than the finality of death is, and that makes it very attractive. If they have a visionary experience, and it's contextualized in the past, which is far easier for the brain with its memory mechanisms to do than to contextualize it in the future. And that visionary, that in some cases epileptic experience, can acquire the status of a real past life. And because there is an intrinsic wisdom to the mechanisms of visions for most people, if we have a vision of something evil, like a demon or the devil, we will understand that this is evil, and the characteristics of his presence are something to be avoided. That's a very, very strong message to avoid evil behavior. So if they have a vision of a past life, they will treat it as though it were a real past life. They can often find themselves getting some very good things out of it. And why is it always famous people? Why is it always important people? And I think the answer is that it is far easier for our brains to turn to create a vision about someone that we know about.
Right, a fantasy.
It seems important because if we feel that we were an important person in that past life, it gives us a feeling of importance in the moment when you have the vision. You're not a worthless person who will crawl between earth and sky, eking out a bare living, drawing your breath in pain, to quote Shakespeare. So we take it's more easier to have a vision of someone who is important, and that in turn makes it it's significant, makes it easier to learn from it.
How can we find?
If someone says to you that they were Joan of Arc in their past life,
right?
Don't tell them, no, you just had some kind of vision or hallucination in this life. say, wow, what was it like being Joan of Arc? What was it like to hear the voice of God? And then they'll tell you something worthwhile. If you tell them it was just an hallucination, they will resist, and you will get nothing out of it. And if you convince them that it was just a hallucination, then they'll stop getting something out of it. If they think they're Joan of Arc, it means they have to listen to pay attention to the will of God as they understand it. And that will is almost invariably in favor of charity, mercy, compassion, kindness, and so forth. And those are good values.
Can we find out? Is there a way to find out who we were?
I don't believe there is.
Okay, well, now that you just totally bummed me out.
If you have a vision, a dream, an hallucination that conveys to you that you were a certain person in a past life, it might be that you were a certain person in a past life. It might be that you just had a vision. And if you look at all of the visions that people have actually had, and there are many of them recorded, Teresa of Avila, Hildegard of Bingen, and such people, many famous visions. And you ask yourself realistically how many of these are coming from their own mind and how many of them are coming from actual experiences. The number is always going to be that more people have these illusory experiences than have the real ones. Because in order to have the real ones, you have to somehow break through the mechanism of death and karma and memories of past lives. And that's a lot less likely than a simple hallucination.
Mm-hmm.
So Occam's razor tells us prefer the simplest explanation.
Right.
The simplest explanation is always that it came from their own mind.
Right. Well, what about moving forward? Can you choose which path you want to go on in your oncoming reincarnation, if I'm wording that right?
Well, subsequent might be a good word. There's subsequent reincarnation.
Right.
But there are a number of people who have had near-death experiences and came back and reported that they had some choice in the matter. In one case in particular, I'm remembering that someone was given that they had an incredibly fast slideshow going in front of them. And when of humans, types, men, women, this race, that degree of intelligence, this degree of intelligence, and one of them struck a response, then that was the type of person that they would reincarnate as. So I remember reading something from one of the many near-death experience books I've read where it said that some births where the life that follows is especially challenging are hotly contested, that many souls want those bodies, that 0.5% that fills our population that has Down syndrome or is mentally retarded or is confined to a wheelchair, because those lives, though very difficult, offer more opportunities for learning. And you have to have a certain degree of evolution in your soul in order to qualify for those births, because it's difficult to do that learning. Not everyone has the prerequisites. But what we're talking about here is essentially spin-offs from the main mechanism. And so all the possible variations and it is fraught with infinite possibilities. For me, even though I seem to be the answer man for a lot of this, simply because there is so much that we don't actually know. And there's no way to separate the hard truth from the beguiling and engaging and uplifting falsehoods that can come up as we review this kind of experience across so many people. And I use those words carefully. These are uplifting illusions. The more you believe that life has purpose, the more you believe that your life has purpose, and the greater the imperative for you to do something meaningful with your life. And the closer you get to doing that, the more people you will help, the more adaptive your behavior will be, and the greater value you will be to your social group, whether it's all 6 billion of us at once now, or whether it was the 50 or 75 people in your tribe 100 1,000 years ago when our species first appeared. Actually, nobody knows how old the human species is. There's huge amounts of debate on the subject.
A couple more quick questions before we take a break, and we'll come back and we'll talk about psychic skills and.
Well, I do have one other thing when we get back, so remind me of that.
Absolutely. We have plenty of time. Two simple questions. One, is reincarnation male to male, female to female, or do you ever jump from male to female? That's a simple question to answer. And second, is it limited to humans? Because I have 2 dogs. I have 3 dogs here that I swear.
Well, if I'm going to cover this answer this question before the break, then I need to jump in and start answering it now. First of all, I don't know whether it is possible to change gender from one life to the next. Remember, I'm dealing primarily with an anthropological hypothesis.
Sure.
That it contributed to the survival of our species. And that leaves many questions unanswered, including whether or not it's possible for a man to become a woman or vice versa. Certainly, each gender always seems to think that the other has a better deal in life. And that may attract some people to want to make the effort. But in the end, men and women both look with a certain amount of envy at the relationship ability of the other gender. Mm-hmm. Men got it made. They work. They create businesses. They don't have to raise the kids, so they can devote their lives to handling money and gaining prosperity and reputation. And, oh, wouldn't that be cool? So says the woman who's got 4 screaming children in her living room with her.
Right.
And men look at women and say, I have to come on to women. In order to find a partner, I have to overcome my shyness and my low self-esteem. And women just have to sit there and be pretty or, be overtly sexual. And that's all it takes. And if I'm overtly sexual, then the women run away. And don't women have a good deal in life? So, and on the other hand, women tend to outlive men. Don't they have a good deal in life?
And they're certainly smarter.
Yes, and women.
So there you go.
Yeah, in many ways they are. Women get it, and men don't.
Yeah, men are dumb.
On the other hand, men get it, and women don't. So I could see that there would be a strong attraction. As for whether or not you can reincarnate as an animal, if you stay as a human, the ideas I work with do give a clearer answer, and the answer is no. And the reason is that the mechanism of reincarnation, by giving us karma, telling us what behaviors work out well and what behaviors don't, pre-adapts us to live in a cultural environment. And human beings survive by living together, and culture, what anthropologists call complex culture, is the way we do that. So if you die and you go through a life review and you see the consequences of your behavior, you will have done a lifetime's worth of social learning. And that information will be of no use to you whatsoever if you reincarnate as a salamander. To use the information that you get during the death process, you have to reincarnate as a human being. Try thinking of it the other way. A lot of people think it would be great to reincarnate as a house cat because they're self-assured and they're free, and the gorgeous piece of steak that we eat costs $10 for a really nice steak dinner, and you can take home the leftovers and give it to your cat, and for next to nothing, the cat has the finest food it wants and all of it that it could possibly eat. So we think, what a great deal. Whenever it wants to lie down and sun itself, it can. But if you had been through a life as a cat, and then you tried to learn something from that life and then apply it to become a human as you become a human being, you wouldn't have enough information, and you would reincarnate as someone who is severely compromised, even crippled socially. So because this is an evolutionary adaptation that contributed to the survival of our species, it will not help you if you reincarnate as a member of another species. Like it or not, we're human.
Right. Can you put the brakes on reincarnation? Can you go to heaven and go through go through the light, go through the tunnel and go, you know what? I just want to stay here. I don't want to reincarnate. I'm cool.
Well, the hypothesis that I work with, which is a scientific hypothesis, has no no suppositions to offer on that. However, in my reading on near-death experiences, I've run into a number of accounts where people were invited to stay for a while, or they wanted to stay for a while, and they knew it was possible. So they get to heaven, and they just want to be in heaven and have heavenly experiences, and be enraptured by the music and enjoy the wonderful food. And if you're Muslim, the rivers run with wine, and you have compliant virgins to wait on you and so forth, and they want to stay there. But ultimately, what the contribution of the human death process to our survival is useless if we don't come back. Another area where traditionally, this is Hinduism and Buddhist tradition, they say that once you have that it's possible to become enlightened and break the cycle of death and rebirth, and just stay on the other side as a perfected being or a perfected spirit, an enlightened one who does not return to this earth. But these are subjective accounts from near-death experiences.
Right.
We can't take any individual storytelling from any of these and say this is how it is.
Right.
We have to work with what agrees, what fits with science. Now, I personally believe many things that I cannot work into a scientific context. I believe them because they're beautiful, but that doesn't make them true. And the idea that we can die and go to heaven and just stay in heaven is a very, very beautiful idea. Hinduism has a legend, a tradition, and it tells us that even the gods get bored. And in order to break the boredom, they come down here to earth and take birth as human beings and enjoy human lives. Some of them reincarnate as peasants, others reincarnate as what used to be called, now that it's banned in India, they would reincarnate as what used to be called untouchables, or kings, or anywhere in the middle. But invariably they are said to lead very, very pious lives. They enjoy the pleasures of the earth, but they don't come to learn pleasure. They come to be challenged and learn things that they can then benefit from when they return to the realm of the gods. And there are many realms of the gods.
Where are the new souls created? And how does that tie into Darwin? If we back up, let's back up.
I think I grasped the question.
Yeah.
How is it that we can have an increasing number of human beings without an increasing number of dead human beings who came before in order to supply them with their karma? And the answer is the person is not what reincarnates. The information about how to live with people is what reincarnates. And when we die, and the information has been collated and is now ready, I believe it's packaged into an entity that we can call a magnetic soliton. A soliton is not a New Age concept or a traditional Hindu concept or anything like that. It is a scientific entity, and they have been observed, and in many contexts. And what a soliton is a self-reinforcing wave that does not change its shape as it moves through a medium. And I believe that the information that comes from our brain that is emitted, it takes the form of a package that retains its shape and its integrity, like a soliton, in the medium of the Earth's magnetic field. So once it's out there and preserved in the Earth's magnetic field, as many developing individuals, whether they're in the womb or they've actually been born, we don't know when the moment of reincarnation happens. I have no reason to think it happens at this, that, or the other stage. It could be as soon as there's enough neural tissue developed in the womb. It could be when the child grows up enough to begin to have the social challenges so as to make use of the social information. But it's downloaded into the individual. Now, you can go online and you can download a screensaver.
Right.
And you can get that information onto your computer, but that doesn't remove it from the server.
Right.
So the information from every single past life that every single human being has ever lived could all still be there in the Earth's magnetic field.
Right.
But if you take such an information packet, a package of karma that was created 5,000 years ago and is tuned to the social realities that existed 5,000 years ago, it's not going to be very useful today because things have changed so much.
Uh-huh.
So that one, like an 8-bit screensaver
Right.
from 1992, isn't going to be downloaded very much.
Right.
Meanwhile, the more recent contemporary ones where we not only have information about how to relate to other people, but we also have information to relate to one another in the electronic age. That could be very useful information. Some people get addicted to Facebook and live on Facebook so deeply that they lose track with the actual people around them. But we don't have past life information that tells us that this is not a good idea, even though today's sociologists and psychologists are saying, no, it's going too far. We're becoming addicted. High school teenagers are killing themselves because a bunch of people gang up on them on Facebook. We don't have past life information that helps us cope with it. So if one such teenager who committed suicide were then to come to take rebirth, the first information you can imagine they might be looking for would be past life information that tells them what not to do, at least, when they encounter such situations. Past life information is updated, but the ability to lose a self at the end of one life and recreate it at the beginning of a next life is not gone. So something continues, but the self is not a thing; it's a process. So one bit of past life information can inform many, many people who are either developing in the womb or just been born. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely, it does. And and you keep saying one thing, and I find this fascinating, which is you keep saying Earth, 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 and I understand the magnetic fields and storage capability. I get that, but are you saying then that the soul would not transverse the universe, and the information here on Earth, would it apply to another solar system? And
okay, all your skeptical listeners are about to smile. These are the scientifically minded ones. Magnetic fields are a field just like gravitational fields, and the intensity falls off with the inverse square of the distance. The intensity falls off with the inverse square of the distance. So every time you double your distance from the center of the source of a magnetic field, you don't cut its field strength in half. You cut it, making the math easier for your listeners, you cut it by a factor of 10. So there will come a point when the magnetic fields are so faint that they can no longer hold the structure of a past life information packet, a magnetic soliton. And I'll say in passing, magnetic solitons have been observed. And if your readers want the reference, they go to spiritualbrain.com, order Sacred Pathways, read it, follow the footnotes, and they will come to it. But if the magnetic field becomes too weak to sustain a structure, then the structure will no longer be available at that point. Maybe you can reincarnate on the moon, maybe you can reincarnate on Jupiter, but the odds of being able to reincarnate on another Earth-like planet, one that will sustain life, is very, very, very small. You might be able to travel to another planet in your vision, in a visionary context, in hallucinatory or trance, with an astral projection context. Mm-hmm. But the chances of you actually going there for your next life will be very, very small. And again, you have to remember that if the social structure of intelligent life on another planet is very, very different from ours, then the information that's preserved in such a past life packet will not be useful there either.
But does it happen?
I doubt it, because the magnetic fields will not be strong enough to sustain past life information. We're dealing now with physics. Physics is not my primary field, although it was the first field that I was interested in when I became interested in science so many years ago. But we have to bring the physics into it, and the laws of physics are going to tell us that eventually you get far enough away from the Earth, the magnetic fields won't preserve the information any longer. You can use a vibrating laser to write a word on a wall. If the clouds are low enough and the weather is clear enough, you can write it on a cloud. But you can't, after that, it's going to break up too much and it won't reach a high cloud. So with a similar mechanism, the information from past lives won't retain its integrity when it gets too far from the Earth, according to this model.
Suicide.
I'm not saying that I have the truth.
No.
I'm saying that I have the first model of reincarnation that passed peer review and got published in a scientific journal. And that's a very different thing from claiming truth.
Right. What about suicide?
Well, it's an extremely maladaptive behavior. And so the odds are pretty good that whatever state of consciousness encouraged you to become suicidal in this life will be discouraged in your next life.
Interesting.
Or the new you's next life.
Right.
And, that death is as maladaptive as it gets.
When you have your life review and things are about to happen, is it because you know that you are about to die? In other words, another way to put this is, if there's a random bullet that is coming through your window and you don't even know that the gun is shot, and do you have your life review at that instant too, even though you have no idea that this bullet is coming? Or is that some type of precognitive vision?
You would still have a death process, again, and these are made explicit in near-death experiences, and you would still have a life review. Once the mechanism of death, so that your mind, your brain knows it's dying, once that starts, the process begins to unfold. There are people who've had near-death experiences when they only thought they were going to die.
That's which is my question. You see a bus coming at you. You know what I mean? You can't get out of the way. You know it's inevitable.
Right.
Then that's one vision. What about like a serious heart attack, a drug overdose? Maybe you're slamming some heroin or whatever it is, but you have time to know that your death is imminent, as opposed to a gunshot or something dropping out of the sky and hitting you in the head.
I would say that being quite completely convinced that you are about to die starts the death process. Now, the areas in the brain that are most implicated in the experience of the tunnel, this is deep in the brain. There are other areas that are implicated on the surface. But once the limbic structures that are most implicated in the tunnel experience, or that experience of the void, they're on the same side of the brain as the brain part, the right amygdala, that is most implicated in stark, intense fear, that feeling of impending doom. And there have been epileptics who've had seizures that began in the right amygdala, and their seizures were filled with the sense that they were about to die. That happened to me when I was a child, and I had pediatric temporal lobe epilepsy. It went away when I hit puberty, as it almost always does. I'm not epileptic now. Instead of having strange nighttime visions, I became incredibly interested in girls and sex. My brain was rewired with the onset of puberty, and my capacity for such experiences went down dramatically. But my seizures were filled with the sense that I was about to die. I would find myself in that infinite void state with that tiny point of light in front of me, unimaginably far away, and it seemed like it was shouting at me very emphatically, without any words, but telling me that it was going to kill me, and there was nothing I could do about it. So I lay on the bed, limp with fear, unable to move, and stayed in this state for what seemed to be a very, very long time. In fact, probably it was not too many minutes, less than half an hour, but while the experience was unfolding, it seemed like it was taking hours or weeks. It was a very disturbing thing. Now, as an adult, I'm glad for those experiences because they gave me an experiential introduction to a lot of what I do now for my work. But at the time, it just seemed like this was it. It's all over. I'm going to die. The seizure ended. The sensation stopped. And what do you know? I wasn't dead. When a person that goes into a similar state without epilepsy, there are no epileptic pathways to prevent the activity from moving into other pathways that initiate the death process. People have taken bad falls that they felt were going to kill them and had out-of-body experiences while their body fell. Then they found themselves back in their bodies and they were hurt, but they weren't dead.
Let's take a quick break right there, Professor. That is absolutely a great spot to break.
Okay.
And, let's take two. This is Fade to Black, only on the Dark Matter Radio Network. We're talking to Todd R. Murphy, neuroscientist, and how the brain creates mystic experiences and spirituality. We'll be back after this. Fade to Black, only on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
This is William from La Crescenta, and I listen to JimmyChurchRadio.com. Jimmy Church.
My name is Alan, and I listen to JimmyChurchRadio.com.
He's always giving it to you straight.
JimmyChurchRadio.com.
On the Dark Matter Radio Network.
Hi, this is Rob Reiner from Anvil, and you're listening to JimmyChurchRadio.com.
What's up? I'm Chris. What up? This is Kyle Massey, and you're listening to Jimmy Church Radio, The Revolution.
All right, everybody, welcome back. Fade to Black Friday. Bespoke radio for the masses only on the Dark Matter Radio Network. We're talking to Todd Murphy, neuroscientist, reincarnation, psychic skills, maybe a little God, prayer. We're going to try to get to all of it tonight. And Professor, I had... you and I talked all week about this, and we were going to run out of time. And sure enough, it's a fascinating conversation. Absolutely fascinating.
Well,
so,
let me add something that to your intro. Remember, I have a book. That's why I'm here.
Sure.
And the title is Sacred Pathways: The Brain's Role in Religious and Mystic Experiences. And your listeners can access it by going to spiritualbrain.com. So what I want to add to our last discussion before we move on to the next theme is that is to explain how the brain creates religious and mystic experiences, which is the main point of my book. And again, I'll invite them all, go to spiritualbrain.com and buy it and read it. They will find it, as the Dalai Lama said, an illuminating experience. Now, because the brain is wired for a certain kind of death process, it is wired for things like the tunnel, going through the tunnel, like wired for entering the light. It is programmed to produce visions of God. It is programmed to access cosmic secrets. It is programmed to allow us to have experiences in which we understand ourselves and understand the world we live in ways that go far beyond ordinary experience. When some of the pathways that support any portion of the death process are initiated while we're still alive, the subjective experience will be a mystic experience. People can see God when they're ill, as often happens during high fevers. They can see God during times of crisis. God can speak to them during their prayers because it uses the same pathways that are used when the voice of God offers us guidance during our death process or a near-death experience. We can go out of our body and travel to other places because our brains are pre-wired to create the experience of being in other worlds. We need that partly for our dreams, and we need it in order for the death process to happen. So our brains are wired to produce mystic experiences if we can access the death process while we are still alive. And very often it takes advantage of a back door. So dying is the front door, but there are back doors. And what very often happens is that a person will go into a state of extreme crisis. They can be in deep pain. They can be in tremendous fear. And if the experience crosses a certain threshold, then the brain structures that support the experience will no longer be able to hold all of the electrical activity. And this is compounded by the fact that there's going to be a whirlwind of chemical activity as well. So when it crosses a certain threshold and breaks through and jumps into another nearby structure, the result will be a mystic experience. One of my favorite instances of this, to illustrate the point, comes from a book of wartime memoirs. And I think the title of the book was The Men of Company K. And there was a guy who was in the Battle of the Hedgerows, which succeeded the D-Day invasion. You know, once the Allied troops got to Normandy, they then had to fight through and start going inland. And the first place they were stuck was in these French hedgerows, and the hedgerows had been built up over centuries. When a rock came up, as a farmer was plowing, he would pick the rock up and move it over to the edge, put it on the wall, and that's where they allowed hedges to grow. So these were very thickly grown hedges, and the roots were extremely deep, and it made for very difficult and bloody fighting. And in this book, the author's name escapes me, but I'm pretty sure I have the title right, at one point someone was pinned down by enemy fire, German fire, and there was artillery in use and hand grenades and mortar fire, and the Germans were doing everything they could to wipe this one group out. And they were severely outgunned. And in the middle of all this, after sustaining the need to pay attention and the need to be aware and be mindful while the threat of death was imminent and on every side, could be a bullet, could be a hand grenade, could be a tank coming through, could be anything. You could die at any moment. And after a certain amount of time, in this tremendous fear, the kind of fear that only prolonged time in a battlefield can create, the man suddenly, when completely detached, his capacity for fear stopped. He was no longer afraid. He was calm and detached and had a kind of equanimity about the whole thing. And all of a sudden, he was out of his body, looking down and feeling this tremendous compassion for the men who were in such danger below him. His out-of-body experience ended. He returned to his body. He continued fighting because that was all he could do. But the reason I'm telling this story is to underscore the point that something as mundane and horrific as war can actually trigger some of the same mechanisms that are used in the human death process. So there are many back doors to the death process. High fever, even anticipation. I read in my book, Sacred Pathways, The Brain's Role in Religious and Mystic Experiences, there's a chapter that tells a lot of these stories. A few of them come from priests who were in such anticipation of the day of their ordination. You know, they have to go through lots of tests, and they have to spend prolonged periods of time in prayer. They're tested by their superiors, and they worry. These are faithful men, and one of their honest worries is, will God find me worthy? Will I be good enough as a priest not to satisfy my examiners, but will I be good enough as a priest to satisfy God? The creator of the universe is going to watch me, and am I going to make a horrible mess of it?
Right.
And then finally the moment comes when the ceremony is complete and they stand up and they are priests. And the relief and the joy that they experience finally reaching that goal can be so incredible that they will literally walk in the presence of God for days after and hear his voice as an audible companion. Illness can do the same thing. Lots of people have, fever, high enough fever where the brain actually starts getting warm, too warm for normal operation. Can find people having these kinds of visions. Sometimes fever delirium visions are horrible. They're just awful. But again, the people know they're awful, and the message of such things is stay away from evil. But they can also find themselves in conversation with angels, spirit guides, meet their ancestors, undergo a health crisis, and their grandmother who is dead appears in the intensive care room and says, "Don't worry, it will be all right. I am with you. You will not die. You will go on. You have a purpose in your life." So there are many ways that mystic experiences can occur. And the mechanism is described fairly clearly in my book. And there is some articles at spiritualbrain.com as well. But death is the basis of mysticism. But it happens with fragments of death appearing in our ordinary lives.
What about ghosts? What are ghosts specifically? And I don't want to segue into to another subject, but this question has come up now in Twitter time and time again. So, is that somebody that's stuck? Is it a purgatory sense, or?
I believe again, your question presupposes that the person who has died has left behind a soul.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't believe that people leave behind their souls, the true self. I believe that the self ends with the end of the death process, and as soon as people begin to take rebirth, it is reinitiated once again. Subjectively, it feels like a seamless transition, but in fact, one self has run its race, and another one is put in the starting gate. So what I think is happening, and we're actually anticipating our discussion of God. But what I think is happening is that relies on the fact, on the theory, the hypothesis offered by Dr. Persinger, that there are two senses of self, one on the right side of the brain and one on the left. The left side is where the language centers are. And because we identify ourselves first with the word we and the word I, as well as we are identified with the self that we are when we relate to other people. The dominant sense of self is the one on the left. That's the one that can deal with language and relate to other people through language. We are a social species. And in any moment when we cannot relate to other people, we are not truly ourselves. We must be ourselves in order to get chewed out by the boss at work. In order to be congratulated at work, we have to be who we are in order to receive the love of other people and to love them in return. And to a large extent, we do it with words. Not completely. There is an indefinable thing that cannot be put into words that is also very much a part of love, whether it's romantically being in love or the love that mothers have for their newborn babies. And there's also a self on the right that does not have language. Now, ordinarily, these two work quite seamlessly together. And the self on the right makes contributions to the one on the left all the time. But occasionally, the communication between the two sides of our brain is disrupted. Maybe there's too much communication. Maybe there's not enough. Maybe there's the normal amount, but it's fallen out of phase. And in that moment, the sense of self on the right is perceived directly, sensed directly by the sense of self on the left, our normal one, our dominant one. And in that moment, we perceive it as a being that exists outside of our body's space. We project it outside of ourselves so that we can perceive it in some kind of context. And I believe this is the basis of either all or almost all experiences of non-physical beings. So in its simplest form, it's the feeling that someone is standing behind you, but when you turn to look, there's no one there.
That was my question. That's exactly my question. What about, you just answered it, but this is a little more indirect. What about when you have a close relative that has died, and you hear these stories repeatedly? You're in you're sleeping, and they
come to visit.
Yeah, they come to visit. And what is happening?
That's most common. That is most common on days of geomagnetic quiet. This has been studied. It's most common on days of geomagnetic quiet, which allows us to have psychic perceptions, whether it's valid psychic information from elsewhere or information that just experiences that just feel like a kind of psychic connection or perception. In many times, the parts of the brain and the process that are involved in doing something for real in waking moments are also supporting the experience when it's happening as a kind of hallucination or a vision. So that the parts of my brain that relate to other people while I'm alive and they're alive are also involved when I relate to them as non-physical beings who are, to the best of my knowledge, no longer alive.
When somebody, and you see this all the time now on television, the different...
Before you go on,
okay.
The other thing about it is that they're most common the third night after the person has died.
Yes.
They're more common at night than during the day, during geomagnetic calm rather than geomagnetic storm.
Right.
And always on the third day. Now, I know a man, a priest. I am an atheist who believes in God, and I have had several priest friends. Took care of his 95-year-old mother up to the point when she died. He was heartbroken. Before she died, I said, listen, you are a man of God. You have many spiritual experiences. Take my advice. I'm a brain scientist. I am, speaking to the priest, I'm a goddamn brain scientist. Listen to me on this. And he said, okay, what? I said, the third night after she passes, stay up and keep a vigil for her, just like they did in medieval times. And he said, okay, I will. And then she died, and he was distraught. I had one tearful phone conversation where he says, she passed away at last. I'm going to keep the vigil, but I can't talk. And then he kept the vigil, and his mother appealed to him, and ever since then has been a kind of spirit guide to him. He believes that she is in heaven speaking to him. I believe that he is projecting his right hemispheric sense of self onto outside of himself as he remembers her and imposes her personality and the sense of her presence and that her voice and so forth onto that vision.
That's a good thing. Well, that's a good.
It.
Yeah, that would be a good thing. Is that mental? Is it mental instability, or is it something that is a positive thing to go through when you have somebody?
It's a positive thing to go through. First, because it facilitates the grief process.
Right.
Secondly, when these people become spirit messengers, they always have good advice to give. Now, St. Paul, Paul of Tarsus, the one who wrote the epistles in the New Testament, was asked by someone about visions, and he said, pay attention, and locutions, hearing voices in the head. This is the classical Christian name for it, as a locution. And he said, pay attention, and if what they tell you is good, then follow it. You have common sense enough to know what is a wholesome piece of advice and what is not. So use your discrimination. And if the being that's giving it to you is telling you how to live better and more godly, then obey what you hear in your head. And if it's telling you insane stuff or telling you to do evil things, then don't. And that is where you go and you have someone cast out the demon. But if it's angelic, if it counsels you to peace, compassion, equanimity, generosity, charity, faith, charity, and so forth, then you don't cast it out. Then you work with it and you accept it as a divine or divinely inspired voice from within.
I have a call that just came in. I know who this is, so I just want to just bring this in real quick, if you don't mind. This is Dino. Hi, Dino. How are you tonight?
Hi, how are you, Jimmy? This very point that you're making just now, I'll tell you, I'm a very literal guy, but I've had 2 or 3 experiences in life like this. When my mother
I can barely
passed
hear
many
you.
years ago unexpectedly, I don't know if it was the third night, but it was the second night. And I'm not into ghosts. I'm into real literal, proven stuff all my life. But I did recall going to bed. I was still awake. I couldn't get to sleep, looking in the corner of the room and seeing what appeared, I felt it was her, a bunch of chiffon, and I just saw her face, and she didn't say anything, and it kind of scared me. And I said to myself, if that's my mother, she'll know that I'm scared, and it'll go away, and it did. And that was one example.
Do you have a question for Todd, Dino?
Well, I guess I'm trying to find out if this is the same thing. The second time that something happened was years later. I was leaving a place very late at night in a big city, happened to have a suit on, which I don't often have, past somebody who was asking for change on a corner, but there was no one. It was a dark part of town. My car was it was after midnight on a weeknight. As I walked, I noticed this person as I was headed to my car, all the street lights were out. There was no way out. This person was parallel walking across the street. And I don't know why, but something in my mind, a voice told me as this person turned to run toward me that they were going to do me harm. And I'd never had a feeling like that. And it was almost like my mother's voice saying, run toward him. And I have no idea why. So I ran, and we crossed in the middle of the street, and it blew his mind so much he went, oh, shit. And I just kept running and went the other way, and I never got held up or whatever he was going to do to me. Are these the things that you're talking now, the sense of ego, the sense of self that I remember from my mother?
Thank you for the call, Dino.
Well, I would say that there's a distinct possibility that in the first case, that it was your sense of your mother's presence projected outside of yourself. And in the second case, you had an intuition that was strong enough that you knew something was going to happen. And because of the first case, it became possible for your mind to very quickly find a context and allow you what might otherwise have been simply an ordinary intuition that this guy represents a threat, and turn it into guidance from your mother. But you weren't being guided by your mother's disembodied spirit. If I believe in reincarnation, as I do, her spirit was busy doing other things. If you believe in heaven and that she had gone there, her spirit was there. But her presence, the sense of her presence, and the unique states of consciousness and subtle, unnameable, indescribable feelings that came to you only when you were with her, provided a context for her to seem to appear and give you the guidance that you needed. And because it came from her, it seemed to be coming from her, you didn't hold yourself accountable, so you could not question it. And the insight to act now could come through much more quickly than if you puzzled the situation out for yourself. So whether it was really her spirit or whether it was her presence that you preserve in your memory of her, it was enough for you to trust and act. When I was very small and my mother would say, get out of the street now.
Right.
And I would get up and run. There was no one else who could yell at me and give me an order that way, that I would obey unhesitatingly the way I did when my mother said it, because I knew her tone of voice. And I knew the difference between do it now because she's angry and do it now because she's scared. And if I had fed myself, if I were in your position and I fed myself my mother's scared voice saying, run now, I would have avoided him too, and just as effectively as you were. But we don't need to say that her soul was hanging around in order for that to come to that. And that's one of the things where people are often offended by what I say. Of course it's their spirit. Of course it's their soul. They know it. But then when I ask them to look a little deeper and say, how do you know it wasn't a projection from your own mind? How do you know that your mind isn't powerful and versatile enough to manifest these experiences when you need them? Can you tell me that the limit of your mind is small enough that an experience of your dead mother cannot happen except through her personal intervention? No. Your brain is absolutely complicated and powerful enough to manifest that experience as well as experiences of whole worlds.
Well, is it in a strange way? It's kind of the same thing. If you think about it, it's kind of the same thing. And
how would you know the one from the other?
That's what I'm trying to say.
Better to just trust
right.
and act and analyze later. And when you analyze later, you have to come to the same thing over and over again. I don't really know.
Right.
But you do know
that
if you hadn't followed
right.
that guidance, that you'd be in trouble.
That's right. And so it would be the same thing.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Now listen to this. This comes from Randy Cole. This is on Twitter. He says, my father died from cancer in 1998. My mother was full-blown Alzheimer's and hadn't spoken for years. The caregiver for her reported that at the moment of my father's death, she sat up and said his name 3 times. She laid back down and did not speak again.
Well, we were going to get on the subject of psychic skills.
That's where I was trying to lead into that, and my next question would be, do we all have this ability? But let's address this. That's an interesting
okay. Well, let me tell you about, I have to take several steps back.
Sure.
But don't let go of that instance, because I might forget it while I think about other things. But if you keep it in front of you and bring me back to it, then we will come to an answer.
I will do my best.
I hope that the time constraints aren't too much, but I'll try and be brief. But, well, you know, I'm a professor guy, and brevity is sometimes hard to come by. There was an experiment done at Laurentian University. Dr. Persinger and some of his colleagues performed it. And what they did was they had 2 people, and they were each connected to brain stimulation devices. And the 2 devices were connected together so that the stimulation that one person received was identical to the stimulation that another person received. Now, the way this stimulation works is there's an array of magnetic coils in a circlet about the head for both of them. And if your listeners go to spiritualbrain.com and scroll down until they see the Shiva neural stimulation system and click through, they can see some illustrations that will make some of this clearer. Again, spiritualbrain.com has some pictures, which I can't do on the radio.
Right.
But the magnetic fields were spinning around the head in tandem, and the magnetic fields changed. So to make the math very easy, I'll pretend that it's a factor of 10, although it's not. So at one moment on both of them, there was a magnetic signal for 10 milliseconds. Then at the next one, in a circle, there was one for 20. And the next one, there was one that lasted 30 milliseconds, and so on through 8 sets of coils. So it was not only spinning around, but it was changing the speed at which it spun around for both of them.
Okay.
And one of them was in a room with a flashing light. The other was in a darkened room with no flashing light. In fact, I believe they had a blindfold on, receiving the same stimulation. When the first person's light flashed, and it flashed on and off slowly enough that it could be to keep it clear, this wasn't a rapid thing, the EEG of the second person showed it. So person A, light is on. Person B, EEG has a certain blip. The brain waves have a certain, what would I call it, a beat, like a musical beat.
Consistent.
The light goes off, and that blip in their brain waves stops. The light goes on, the blip returns, back and forth. And what this is evidence that of communication between brains. There was no significant magnetic output from the flashing light, and even if there was, the magnetic output would be at 60 hertz, the frequency of alternating current that powered the light.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But the other one's EEG was not showing 60 hertz going on and off. In some other experiments, and there were several, so I'll only tell you about 2 because time is passing. But there were an experiment done where pairs of what they called intimates, brothers and sisters, mothers and children, husbands and wives, boyfriends and girlfriends, were set up so that one member of the pair was in a room looking at pictures of places in the area. Places that everyone went. If you live in downtown New York, you might think Times Square.
Right.
If you live in Chicago, you might think the center of the Loop. This was an area around Sudbury, Ontario, where nearly everyone had gone, at some time or other. So a square where the restaurants were, this kind of thing. So the one who was getting the stimulation, again, the same circumcerebral, around the head stimulation. And if that doesn't ring a bell, just go to Spiritual Brain, click on the Shiva thing, look at the pictures. That will inform a lot of this. So they were asked to just free associate. Just talk about any images, any pictures, anything that came to their minds. While the other pair, their brother, their lover, their mother, their husband or something, was in the other room looking at pictures of these areas. And they were told, think of the other person and any experience that you had with them while you were in that area. Tell us about the experience. So they would then be thinking of the other person at the same time as they were thinking of the location. And nobody knew what order the pictures were going to be in. So when the times that the person without the stimulation, the one looking at the pictures, when they were looking at each picture, the time was recorded. So they spent 20 seconds talking about this picture, 20 seconds talking about a picture of that place, and so forth. Then these were compared to the free association of the first person, who had no pictures to cue their mind. They would just say whatever they thought of. And then this was all transcribed and given to 44 independent raters, people whose job it was to rate on a scale of 1 to 10 the congruence between the pictures and the pictures the person was looking at and the words they were expressing. And what they found out was that they lined up 2.5 times more often than chance alone. So how was the person getting the stimulation receiving the information about what the first person was looking at? And the answer is a direct brain-to-brain communication. So what this is and has been touted as, and what I believe it really is that Dr. Michael Persinger has discovered and confirmed in 2 experiments with quantification, experiments that yielded numbers, and that's the magic phrase for scientists who are not ultra skeptico debunking, atheist, non-intuitive people, scientists, is that if the experiment yields numbers, you've got a real experiment, and you can actually say that the result, you can interpret the result legitimately.
Right.
This proved that it is possible for brains to communicate directly with other brains. I'm sure there are lots of people who are married, sleep next to their husband or wife, remember their dreams, and every once in a while, with a certain kind of regularity, they would both wake up and found that they had dreamed about the same thing. This is not a rare event in human experience.
What about distance? Is there a distance factor there? Could my wife be in Moscow and myself here in Los Angeles and still have that connection?
Well, anecdotally, yes, but the experiments don't support it. The experiments don't say that it's not possible. The experiments simply all happened in one laboratory where everyone was reasonably close to each other.
Right.
But there are many stories where intimates, like the mother in San Francisco wakes up knowing that something is wrong with her daughter who's in Atlanta.
Right.
And is so disturbed that she can't go back to sleep, so she calls the daughter in Atlanta. Or let's say it's the mother in Atlanta calling the one in San Francisco. So it's earlier in San Francisco, and she says, "How are you? I just had to talk to you. I want to see how you're doing." And the daughter's in tears and says, "My boyfriend just went berserk. He stole a car and got in an accident. He got drunk. He said he wasn't going to drink again, but now he's drunk and he's in jail. My boyfriend hit me. I just got into a car accident," and so forth. The mother knew. And apparently, the distance between the two was not an obstacle to this kind of information coming through. The Earth has only one magnetic field. So if these kinds of projections are actually magnetic emissions from the brain that will accompany the electrical activity, and all electrical activity is accompanied by magnetic fields. This is normal physics. Maxwell's equations tells you how much electricity gets you how much magnetic field. And the field strength can fall off very much across from Atlanta to San Francisco. But that won't mean that the information content from one of their brains won't still match up with the information receptivity of the others, and then the mother knows. So I don't think distance is much of an obstacle. It is, I think, when we're talking about reincarnating on Jupiter, a question that no one has ever put to me before, but it's not an obstacle when the mother knows that someone she loves is in danger.
Now, what about, let's get back to Randy's story about his father dying of cancer.
The dying husband, when he died, we would suppose that there was a burst of electrical activity as two things happened. One, that information packet was released, and two, in agreement with some research that was done, I believe it was late last year, and I think they were in Holland, where laboratory rats who were dying, apparently someone was doing some research with lab rats that involved the labs dying. I don't participate in these kinds of animal vivisection experiments, and may they have good mousy reincarnations. But apparently there was a burst of, I don't recall whether it was photon activity or electrical activity. I don't recall because Dr. Persinger has done some work on photon emissions, and I was trying to get my mind around it quite recently. But there was a definite emission from these rat brains. So what this implies, if something similar is happening with humans, and that has not yet been established, so I'm being hypothetical here, or rather I'm being speculative, is that the end of the death process, the moment when a person's consciousness, in whatever form that may be, whether it involves self-awareness or not, exits the body, that there's a burst of activity. And she would know from spending decades, this is her husband we're talking about, and I presume they're very old, they've got Alzheimer's, from decades of being in his presence, she knew his presence when she felt it. And she felt that she was feeling it in a very unusual context. It's not like he walked into the room to see if she would take some food. He walked out of his body, and the unusual context could have been enough so that the novelty of her sense of his presence was enough to jolt her for a moment. Now, the Alzheimer's involves a certain amount of disordered brain activity. The brain structures that are influenced by Alzheimer's don't stop working, they rather work wrongly. So to an extent, this is a misnomer, but I'm going to keep it simple, to some extent at random. So when this very unique and personally important information came into her brain that bore the sense of her husband's presence in a new way, it would be quite possible for it to cut through the randomness and for her to be aware of him and spark the memory of one thing about him, his name. Then she's focused on him and trying to connect with him in whatever way, if only to find out why his presence feels different now.
Right.
And one very natural thing to do would be to call out his name, as if he's going to be in the room and she could hear him, he would answer.
Do we all have psychic abilities and abilities like that? And what about yourself, too?
Do we all have psychic abilities? My answer would be yes, but not in the same measure. My guess, based on the normative data for temporal lobe lability, sensitivity in a certain area of the brain that's implicated in these experiences, is that about 1/3 of the people have such experiences commonly, 1/3 sometimes, and 1/3 either never or almost never. But we're not all supposed to be psychic. Imagine, if you will, very early in our evolutionary history, and we have everyone in the tribe gathered together in a tribal council to make a decision, to avoid a threat, to take an advantage of an opportunity. Those people who are prone to psychic perceptions will have what they call cognitive style, one way of thinking. And other people who have no psychic experiences whatsoever will have a different cognitive style. And if both of them speak about the same issue in the same gathering, then the social group as a whole, the tribe as a whole, will have been exposed to two different sets of thoughts about the same thing, and both with completely different perspectives, which means that there is always going to be more than one frame of reference brought to bear on any tribal problem. And the more different ways of thinking about a problem, the tribe, or an opportunity that the tribe has, the better their chances for everyone to agree that this one or that one is the right way to go. They won't have to follow the first idea that comes along. And they won't be so slavish in their thinking that they will automatically do whatever the chief or the shaman thinks is right. So one wants a completely this-worldly response. There's buffalo coming over. We haven't seen this herd before. They're bigger than we expect, but let's go out there and kill that buffalo.
Right.
Let's go out and get them. And the psychic guy says, no, I have a bad feeling about this.
Right.
These are big buffalo. We have to be careful. We can hunt them, yeah, but we got to find some new way. And we can't try and get 6 buffalo at once. We want to just get one and be content with that, because that's what we know what to do. I got a bad feeling about this. Meanwhile, the aggressive hunter who wants to be seen as a hero to his people says, no, we can go out. I can take 3 of them myself. The shaman, who is more psychic, says, no, we will err on the side of caution. There's a risk here. So you will go, you will take 1, you will feed the people, and we will wait for one of our normal herds to come by. Should we migrate to this place where fruit grows in abundance? One says, no, let's not do that because it's been dry this year. Another psychic says, no, wait, no, they can see in their mind's eye, as if through clairvoyance, they can see that the trees are heavily laden, and they say, yes, let's go, there's going to be food. So the whole tribe hears a yes, and they all hear a no, and together they make their decision, and this increases our chances for survival. So we're not all supposed to be psychic.
What about it's the same subject, but in a modern context. With the internet, with like Twitter right now, over here on Twitter, we have probably 50, maybe 100 people that are participating in Twitter. We're all connected neurally through through the internet, through wires, through the ether, and we're all communicating together. Are we, all of us, like, are we bonding? Yeah, well? Exactly.
My answer would be a cautious maybe. And a lot would depend. If someone has heard many of your programs and they've participated in the Twittering many times, and they have some experience with knowing how the discussion will go and what kind of the remarks will get agreement and what kinds won't, then they might be able to bring their intuition to bear on the process. But I think that unless people have spent time together in the flesh, their capacity for psychic communication with one another will be very much lower. But that doesn't mean that they can't build up an intuition about what happens on Twitter with Fade to Black. So you could build up an intuition that makes it seem as though they are all connected, brain to brain, but the intuition would actually be about the website. It's very difficult to tease these things apart.
Right.
We have brains that respond to worthwhile information, engaging information, and brains that respond to information from other brains. We don't have brains that allow us to tell the one from the other. All of our psychic perceptions, including more ordinary semi-rational intuitions, all appear to our minds through the same sense. It's not like we have a hearing for things, information from other brains, and a sense of touch for information across the internet. It all appears to the same sense. And for this reason, and this kind of thing is why some dogs and cats who are confronted with a screensaver on a television of a fish, or a fish tank, or a screensaver of other dogs running, will respond to the TV exactly as though it were other dogs, or the cat as though it were fish. And so we're not built to tell them apart. Most people who are really skilled in these areas and have even been through psychic training, some psychic training is worthless and others is tremendously helpful and and useful if you have the knack. But one of the things that they teach you is how to discriminate, and I'm not a teacher for this, so it's better if you don't ask me, how to discriminate the perceptions that come from within your own mind that may be meaningful and are your intuition, and how to, from the perceptions that are truly coming from outside your mind and can be meaningful and also useful. It takes considerable introspection to learn to tell the one from the other. And in many cases where all we're looking for is something meaningful, do I ask the boss for a raise today? It doesn't matter where the information comes from, only that it has the ring of truth, so to speak, inwardly. And as far as your question, am I psychic? Well, it's me talking about me. And I'm trying to sell my book. Wow, it's at spiritualbrain.com. Go and buy it. And in order to encourage you to buy it, I will claim now that I am a powerful psychic master. Dum dum dum.
Well, yeah, okay. I've got.
I'm not a trustworthy source. So if you're willing to give me that, if you're willing to respect my integrity enough to take what I say, without dissing it simply because it comes from me, I will say that I have developed good intuition to the point where I often know things that I could not know, but only within my work. I get a lot of emails from people who are looking for psychic and spiritual guidance. I know who's nut job and who's not. And among the nut jobs, I know who is trying to get out of being a nut job and knows that that's what they are, and who is completely embroiled in it and lost all points of reference. And it makes a difference because if I can't tell the difference, and I can't say what in one email makes me think that someone's a nut and another makes me think that they're a seeker, my intuition is there. Now, I also use the Shiva neural stimulation system, which is the kind that was used in those experiments. And when I use them, my psychic perceptions and capacity for intuitions definitely goes way up. I know who's calling sometimes when the phone rings without getting to caller ID.
I was just getting to that. And
I know when the doorbell rings, I know whether it's UPS or whether it's an actual person that has business with me of one kind or another.
Listen, we have, Doctor, I said doctor again, Professor, we have 9 minutes left before I roll credits, and I've got
How would you like to spend them?
Yeah, exactly. I've got two things. Number one, so let's try to split this up, 4 minutes, and I'll get two answers out of you.
Okay, ring a bell.
Deja vu. What
Deja
is
vu
going?
Is what happens when the areas of the brain that consolidate and retrieve memories have too much connection with the areas of the brain that carry us through our experiences in the present moment. So you've got the present and the past. We access our memories to help us interpret what's happening in the present all the time. In fact, every time anything comes up that we have any experience with, without our being consciously aware of it, we tap our pool of memories and associations, and so that we can be reminded of things that will be useful in the present moment. But when the areas that deal in the past and the areas that are working with the present are hyper-connected, then the present feels like the past, and the brain can actually create a memory. Just go and Google false memory, and you'll find there are huge numbers of pages and many scientific papers and studies that deal in it. We can create a memory to match our sense of the past right now. Now, the interesting thing about deja vu is that because it's dealing with the past and the present, and because it's creating information to suit the context, it is, I believe, tapping some of the same capacities that appear when we're having legitimate psychic experiences. So if you have something happen now, and it reminds you of a dream, forget the fact that the dream might be entirely fabricated, or in the language of neuroscience and psychology, confabulated, and instead try to remember the dream, because what you can remember from that dream may actually offer you relevant information that can help you do the right thing in the present. Deja vu doesn't have to be a recurring moment of the past in order for us to treat its perceptions as though they were real memories and learn from them. But people get stuck because they really want to know, when did this moment occur in the past? And instead of looking at what their mind has shown them that they can learn from and use, they start doing a mental calendar, looking at the day and the time in the past that the present moment harkens to. And by so doing, they throw all the possible guidance that the feeling of deja vu can offer them down the drain.
Well, that's almost the exact opposite of how I feel about it. And
Okay.
that's interesting. Well, I've always felt that that it is a genuine opening of somehow the future is in our brain. Somehow it is there, and then when a genuine deja vu happens, it's you know what is about to happen, whether it's words speaking or actions in the room.
I might have an hallucination of the Statue of Liberty, but that doesn't mean that the Statue of Liberty doesn't exist. What I'm saying is that we're talking. Remember, I may believe all kinds of things that are completely impossible, like the Red Queen in Alice in Wonderland. I have believed as much as 6 impossible things before breakfast. But in constructing scientific hypotheses, I have to stay with the scientific explanations or find explanations that are consistent with science as much as I can.
I understand that,
just
but
because deja vu can be created by a hyperconnectivity of the brain parts that deal in the past with the brain parts that deal in the present does not mean that you have no access to the future.
Sure. Have you? It sounds like maybe you haven't had a real deja vu.
I have had many, many deja vus. When I was a child with temporal lobe epilepsy, I'll say it, it's gone away, but I had it then.
Right.
I had lots and lots of deja vus. The assumption I think you're making, and it may be true in some of the cases, but I would encourage you to be skeptical about thinking that it's true in all cases,
right,
is that the deja vu harkens to a moment of forgotten precognition.
Okay.
And that is a very big assumption to make.
Yes.
Maybe it is so.
Yes.
But certainly you will guide yourself through your life better if you act as though it were so. And you would be more skeptic-friendly if you remembered that it is a just so story. But just so stories, especially in the range of psychic perception and spirituality, are some of the most useful that people can have. They offer you short-duration myths that you can live by. Joseph Campbell, the folklorist, has a very famous book called Myths to Live By. The concept is beautiful. Don't live by the truth. Live by what feels important and beautiful, moment to moment.
Well, I can't see. This is the thing: is it happens often enough and is so exact and solid. I have to pause and grab onto the thought of, you know what, the future, even though as impossible as it sounds, is now, and I see it, and when it happens, and that's why. When somebody talks to...
There are very few studies that do tend to confirm that. I'm not saying that deja vus are not forgotten precognitive moments. I'm saying that most deja vus can be interpreted in terms of guidance from your own mind, information from your own mind in this moment. And holding on to the idea, and it's a beautiful idea, so it makes it worth holding on to, but holding on to the idea that the future is now is no less beautiful or engaging or staggering in its implications than the idea that now is now.
I say it all the time on this show. I really do.
Be here now.
Yeah, the
no
now
time
is now.
like the present.
Now, okay, one last little thing. See, we got 2 minutes left, and I literally do have to roll
I hope
credits.
we can do this again sometime.
Oh no, right back at you. And we've got so many other things we need to talk about, including this next. Is remote viewing? Is it something that we can accept as a possible reality?
Yes. a possible reality with emphasis on possible, and we have to recognize that not every time a person feels that they're doing remote viewing are they actually looking at something that's some distance away. The mind can confabulate an illusory remote viewing. But let's remember, it is an open secret that government agencies use remote viewing. In fact, the technology that I spoke about, the Shiva system, spiritualbrain.com, that was used by Ingo Swann and Sean Harabans, two well-known remote viewers, and it did indeed enhance the accuracy of their remote viewing hits. And they were not remote viewing unverifiable missile silos in Siberia. They were remote viewing individual experimenters, and the results were not negative. So yes, remote viewing is a clear, distinct possibility. I know because I've had experiences, a very dramatic spiritual experience in my early days working with this technology that I've mentioned, and I was still learning how to use it. I stimulated one area of my brain too much. I went into a negative state. I stimulated another area to compensate. I came out, and all of a sudden I could heal by laying on hands. I could do remote viewing. I could hear the music that was playing in other people's heads. Now, I only tested it with one person, but, you know, I would hear, it was a child, and we played a game. What music is in my head? I'd close my eyes, she'd think of a song, and I'd tell her what song it was, and she would say yes. And in a couple of times, it was very, very unlikely music. But I had remote viewing happen. I would think of a certain person, and I could see what they were doing. So I called up one person, and I said, "Are you doing this right now?" And they'd say, "Yeah." Call up the next person. "Are you doing this right now?" And the answer was yes. And then once I was dumb, and I called someone up and said, "Are you doing this right now?" And they said, "That's none of your business."
I got to thank you.
I believe that remote viewing is a legitimate psychic perception that is trustworthy, but not in every case.
Well, I watched it happen with my own experience and something I was directly involved with. It happened in real time practically on this show. His name was Ed Reardon, Courtney Brown and that whole connection. And I watched it happen. I watched the video, and it had to do directly with this show, and I was blown away. I absolutely lost sleep over it. It was absolutely incredible. And with that, doctor, I said doctor again, professor.
Yes, you did. Let me say goodbye to your audience. I enjoyed the conversation very much. I'll send you an email. I hope we can talk further about different things. They're all invited to come and get my book, spiritualbrain.com, Sacred Pathways. And I do answer as many emails that come from something like this as I can. So they mustn't think that I'm too busy to answer or that it will be futile. I like hearing from people. In fact, people are some of my favorite things on this earth. And all of them who listened all the way through, I say thank you for your attention. Would that I were truly worthy of it.
Thank you, Todd. It was wonderful, and we'll do it again very soon. And just stay with me. I'm going to read the credits right now. I gotta roll. Coming up next is I think it's Alvarez. Brian Alvarez will be up next with After Dark. Special thanks to Keith Rowland and Art Bell. Fade to Black's executive producer is Rita Kamarian. Show is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Mark D. Kovar. The announcers are Steve Harder and Mark D. Kovar. Music is by Doug Aldrich. Show intro is performed by Spaceboy. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR and the Dark Matter Radio Network. Next week, Dr. Franklin Rule, Richard Dolan, and Dr. Barry Taft. Say goodnight, Todd Murphy.
Good night. Good night to you all.
Everybody have a safe weekend. I'll see you on Monday.